To protect people from the dangers of the harsh natural environment, a new nation called Blue Lagoon was created. The ruler of this nation was a wise and kind man who governed the country with exceptional justice. The citizens of Blue Moon lived carefree and in harmony under his protection. However, as a result of a coup d'etat, this man was brutally killed. Soon, rebellion engulfed the entire country, and the land was turned into a burning wreck, filled with the anger and ashes of the destroyed people. Many people suffered at the hands of cold blades and even lost all hope because of the rebels. There was a man in a red mask who was able to destroy the leader of the rebels and ultimately put an end to all this suffering. He became a national hero who brought peace back to all the people and was called the Red Man. The director, reading about all this from a textbook, added that 100 years had passed since the end of these battles. A girl sitting at her desk raised her hand to ask why they were still living in slums and not in the Blue Moon, since the battle had ended so long ago. One of the boys answered instead of the teacher and said that it was because they were portrayed as villains in the story. The teacher, who was also the principal of this small school, added something that many already knew. The man said that it was because these children were the descendants of rebels who had once almost destroyed the Blue Moon. The children listened attentively to their teacher and understood the seriousness of his words. The man also said that despite their past, they must never forget that 9 of them were completely innocent. The teacher closed his textbook and told all the children that their history lesson was over. The man checked the time and said that it would soon be lunchtime and that they all needed to help Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim was picking berries at that time, doing so very carefully so that they would not get crushed. The children rushed to Mr. Kim and shouted that they had come to help him and wanted to finish quickly so they could go to lunch. Teacher Kim was very happy to see the children and greeted his helpers with a warm smile. During lunch, one of the boys looked at his plate and was very unhappy that they had to eat beans again, which he didn't like at all. The boy, whose name was Haji, threw the beans on the floor and promised himself that he would never touch them again. A girl told Haejin that he couldn't be so picky and shouldn't act that way. Teacher Kim saw this and told the boy that he had to eat the beans and that there was a good reason for it. The children also knew the reason, and one of them said that it was because people who lived in the slums died every day from hunger because they had nothing to eat. Therefore, they should be grateful to the school for the food. Teacher Kim replied that this was true, but that they still had to eat the beans because they would help them grow up healthy and strong. At that moment, the boy Paeksan sat down on the floor and began to pick up all the scattered beans and put them in his mouth. Teacher Kim saw this and asked Paeksan to spit the beans into his hand because he could get sick if he ate dirty food. However, it was too late, and the boy had already swallowed them. The man had an unusual name, Kim, but he had a fairly ordinary job as a teacher in the slums. It was the only school in the slums, but in reality it was more like a shelter. There were only 9 children in the school, 1 teacher, the principal, and no one else. Teacher Kim had finally finished some minor construction work, and now they were all temporarily protected from the rain. A boy with a red mask on his face ran out into the hallway and started shouting that he was a righteous hero and that he would definitely stop the battle. The girl was unhappy that the red mask had gone to the same person again, because she also wanted to be a hero, at least for a little while. The boy disagreed because he considered himself much faster and stronger, and therefore, in his opinion, he should be the red man. Teacher Kim stopped the game and told Tashina to be more considerate of others. Tashina asked Mr. Kim to give them back the red mask and said that they were just playing heroes. Mr. Kim replied that the game was certainly very good and fun, but he reminded them that he had already asked the children to be more careful when taking other people's things. The teacher noticed that a boy named Maru was sitting alone in the classroom, reading something intently. Kim thought it would be a good idea for the boy to play with the other children on the playground. Maru immediately agreed to the teacher's suggestion because he felt responsible for the younger children. The children were delighted because they were going to play soccer at the playground with their friends. Teacher Kim looked closely at the mask he was holding in his hands and decided that he had to clean it up and return it to its owner. The principal suddenly appeared behind the teacher, startling him, and said that he was looking for his mask, but couldn't find it anywhere. The man guessed that Tesh had taken his red mask again, and the teacher confirmed this. Teacher Kim couldn't understand what the boy could possibly like about such a scary mask that he would take it at every opportunity. He saw only an ordinary mask and didn't understand what was so special about it. Kim was taken aback as it was their principal's favorite item, and immediately apologized if he had offended him with his words. The principal replied that he was not offended at all, but he was curious why the teacher thought the mask was so scary. The teacher decided to tell him that when he touched it, his heart began to beat faster, and he immediately felt very hot. The teacher added that he felt like an angry bull, which only made the principal laugh. After all, Mr. Kim was someone who never got angry and was always very kind. The principal decided to change the subject and said that the weather was getting worse and it would probably rain soon. Therefore, they needed to take their things down as quickly as possible. Teacher Kim saw that it had suddenly become cloudy outside, even though it had been sunny that morning. The principal decided to tell his friend that he had been hearing strange rumors lately. He had heard that some men in suits had started kidnapping children, and this had alarmed him greatly. The principal didn't think these people would come to a place like this since it was surrounded by mountains. However, he believed that as guardians, they had to be very careful and warn all the children in advance. At that moment, Hajin was trying to aim as best he could so that his kick would reach the target. However, the boy failed and was unable to score a goal, which the girl couldn't help but point out, saying that he hadn't been able to hit the ball once after so many attempts. Teshkin saw that the ball had rolled far beyond the field and shouted to the boys that he was going to run after it himself. The boy saw that the ball had stopped near an open gate, and on the other side there were some strange machines that scared him. Kim was glad that thanks to the help of the director and the girl So-in, they were able to finish before it started raining. Teshine appeared in the hallway unexpectedly, and judging by the boy's face, something was very disturbing him. The teacher thought that the boy had fallen and hurt himself playing soccer, and that was why he was so upset. But that wasn't the problem at all. Tesh told the teacher and the principal that some strange men had grabbed the other children. The teacher couldn't believe that Hina, Nuna, and all the others had been taken away by some men. Suddenly, someone appeared behind the boy and said that they weren't strange men at all. The man with the strange appearance said that he was a scientist sent by the Blue Moon, and that his name was Noggle. He said he had come here to find exceptional young talents who could help the city. The scientist considered himself very lucky to have found 9 children in such a slum. Noggle added that he would have liked to express his joy to them, but he had no lips or eyelids. Kim couldn't understand what the scientist was talking about. Kim assumed that they were kidnappers, as he had heard rumors, but he couldn't believe that this was really happening. Men in suits appeared next to the scientist, and one of them did not deny that they were all involved in human trafficking. Now they were going to kill the teacher and the principal and take the children with them. The man in the suit was unhappy with the doctor because he had already told Noggle not to reveal his identity so easily. The scientist apologized and said he just couldn't help himself. The strange man in the suit considered this discovery amazing and did not expect these guys to be able to run so fast. They were determined to capture the children no matter what, and were confident that they would succeed. The director shielded the children with his body and told Mr. Kim to run away as fast as he could and take the children with him. The man then turned to the people in suits and, looking at them menacingly, said that no one would dare to pass him. He took out his weapon and shot the director, thinking it was very foolish to hope that he could stop his men alone. The man in the suit decided to apologize for the sake of appearances and explained that he was simply tired of all these dramatic scenes, and therefore did not want to stand on ceremony and got straight down to business. He decided to destroy Mr. Kim immediately. The man gave the order to his men to take the children and do it quickly, as he wanted to leave the place before dawn. The children resisted with all their might and begged to be released immediately, but it was useless, and no one even listened to them. The men soon loaded the kidnapped children into minibuses and drove them away in an unknown direction. Kim was breathing heavily and trying to understand what had just happened, and what it was like to experience something he had only heard about before. The teacher had no idea that something like this could happen to him. He was sure that it wouldn't happen because no one was interested in this place, and hardly anyone knew about it. And besides them, there was never anyone else here. It was their paradise, and they could wander peacefully among the ruins left after the battle. They were all calm and confident that they had finally found happiness, but everything turned out completely differently. Their dream was destroyed in an instant, and one night became the most terrible of their lives. The director struggled to get up and realized that what had just happened was not a nightmare but reality. The man knew that every day thousands of people died in the slums. He had built this school in the mountains to protect the children, but he had failed, so he decided that someone else had to do it for him. The principal put his red mask on the teacher and said that he had to save the future of these children, and those were his last words. After a few long minutes, Kim finally came to, but he was no longer just a man. He was a man in a red mask who was very angry. One minibus was still standing in the parking lot waiting for 10 minutes to pass, as they had been instructed not to leave earlier. This was all done because they were being followed, and they wanted to split up. They loaded the girl into the car and were not very happy that they were now responsible for this child. The driver was about to leave, but his partner asked him to wait because he wanted to smoke. However, a moment later, the man heard that the smokers were completely unaware of the danger they were in. The minibus driver looked out the window to see why they weren't driving and what noise he had just heard. The man saw a horrific scene. A man in a red mask was beating his partner and saying that smoking was strictly prohibited in that area. He immediately pressed the gas pedal to get away from there as quickly as possible, but his attempt was unsuccessful. The man in the mask possessed incredible strength and was able to hold the car with one hand with ease. He was very angry because no one dared to kidnap his children. The girl got out of the stopped minibus and held her head, which had been slightly injured in the impact. She looked back and saw a man in a red mask holding an adult man above the ground with one hand. The girl couldn't believe that she was actually seeing a red man in front of her. The red man was furious and tried to get an answer and find out where his children had been taken. A person's social role was predetermined from birth. These people were the ones with the noble blood of the Blue Moon flowing through their veins. They wanted the rest to keep this information locked away in their minds forever because they could never be anything else to each other. The red man tried to take off his mask, but he couldn't, and this made him even angrier. He tried with all his might to take it off, but he began to realize that he would hurt himself before he could get rid of the mask. The man also noticed that because of this mask, he was always angry, and this feeling never left him for a moment. The girl sat frightened under the table and asked her teacher if he had turned into a red man forever. The man was angry and considered himself a real monster, and his words and actions frightened the girl even more. The girl confessed to the teacher that she was very scared, and the tears in her eyes were proof of that. The man told her to stop crying immediately and calm down, but his threatening tone upset the girl even more, and he realized this too. Out of helplessness and because he felt very sorry for her, he lowered his head so hard that he hit the floorboards. The red man realized that no matter how angry he was, he shouldn't have taken it out on the girl. The man was still beside himself and didn't know what to do, so he asked for some time to cool down. After a while, the red man said goodbye to the director for good and did so properly. The red man never understood what the director was thinking or why he had put his mask on him. The man plunged into his memories of being bullied by a group of guys. The guys were angry that Kim had disobeyed them again because they had warned him that if he crossed their path again, they would simply kill him. One of the guys started to get really angry because he had wasted all his energy on Kim, and the other was disgusted that the guy didn't react to them at all. After a while, the director found the boy and saw that he was in pretty bad shape. The man couldn't understand how the boy was going to survive in such a cruel world. Kim was lying on the ground and simply replied that there was nothing he could do about it. The man believed that as long as he was alive, he would always be in danger, but youth was on his side. That day, the man offered to take him in and added that he knew where the young man could stay. He wanted Kim to become an elementary school teacher and look after children, and this offer surprised the boy very much. The man then told the young man that he didn't believe it was true that only teachers could teach, or that not every mature adult was capable of becoming a teacher. The young man was sure that he simply could not miraculously become a teacher when he had been poor all his life. He followed the man without hesitation because he had nowhere else to go, but he planned to escape from there as soon as possible. The man then wished the young man good luck from the bottom of his heart, and added that he believed in him and knew that everything would work out. After some time, Kim asked the director why he had chosen him for this job, since there were many people in the slums who were much poorer than him and who needed help more. The director replied without hesitation that he understood this when he looked into the young man's eyes and had no doubts left. The man believed that Kim was perfect for the job, as he was weak, kind, and even a little stupid. The director considered all these factors to be a big plus. The director then said that he had personally experienced what it was like to be helpless and understood that such people would never treat others badly. Another important argument was that while Kim had been working with children, he had never once deceived them. The man realized that as their teacher, the young man would begin to feel a bond with them, and that was why Kim was still with them. The principal trusted the young man and believed in him. He knew that if something happened to him in the future, the children would be completely safe with their teacher, and that was very important to him. The children loved Mr. Kim, and they simply needed a school like this. The man was brought back to the present by a girl who began to cry bitterly and begged the teacher not to leave because it was very dangerous. The red-haired man did not deceive the child and agreed that it was all very dangerous, but he tried to explain to the girl that he simply had to save the other children. The man considered all those children his precious family, and so he told her that just as she was worried about her teacher, he was worried about the other children. He also said that it would be very difficult, but that Soen had always helped her teacher, so he was sure that she would manage everything until he returned. Soen hugged the man tightly and said that he must return to her with the other children. The red mask went to the very center of the slums, where every corner was steeped in pain and poverty. The man put on a large hooded cloak and asked a passerby if he had seen any trucks passing through the area last night. The man was very frightened, but repeated that he had not seen anything and that he was very sorry. He was angry and upset that he couldn't find any traces of the trucks, while the passerby couldn't get over the shock, thinking he had been talking to the monster himself. Red Mask was sure that the costumes and trucks were just an unusual sight in the slums, as the only important thing in this place was to feed and clothe oneself. He also thought that these people were involved in something more than just theft. Suddenly, the man stopped, remembering that on that terrible night, the scientist had told them that he had been sent by the Blue Moon itself. The scientist had also said that he had come to their school to find exceptional young talents who could help the city. The man replayed this memory over and over, trying to pick out the most important details. He was convinced that these kids were unusual criminals and did not understand what the city was up to. However, despite all the strangeness, he had to save the kids at any cost. The city guards received a report stating that the white truck that had driven into the slums had not yet returned. The chief pondered the fact that the truck had gone to the slums, and another guard explained that they were supposed to bring lunch. The man was already angry because those street creatures, as he called them, even tasted good. The chief wasn't particularly worried because he was sure that they didn't even understand what was going on, so he didn't think anyone could have attacked the truck. The boss was furious because now apparently he had to find those guys, and he didn't quite understand what to do. Their attention was drawn to a vagrant who, in their opinion, was probably just wandering around begging, but had gone too far and ended up in the wrong place. They ordered the man to stop immediately. The guard looked sternly at the beggar and said that this was the main gate of the city of the Blue Moon, and that he was not allowed to be there. The man in the hooded robe said that he was looking for a white truck, which greatly surprised the guard. The red man snatched the report from the guard's hands and saw that the gourmet truck had arrived here with children. The guard demanded that the report be returned immediately, and the red man complied, but not in a very friendly manner. The other guards saw what was happening to their boss and rushed to help. The red man turned to the other guards and asked which of them knew where the gourmet truck was headed. He promised to spare the life of whoever told him. The guard drew his weapon and shouted that he would destroy this insolent man, but he did not have time to do anything because the red man threw him against the wall with his strength. The man warned that when someone is speaking, they should not be interrupted. The red man decided to ask the other guard if he was also going to shoot him. However, the guy was not stupid and replied that he would not do anything like that and assured him that he would take the man to the truck. The guy said that there was only one problem. The gate to the gourmet shop was closed. He explained that these huge gates could only be opened from the inside, so they would have to wait. The guard also said that the gate only opened at night when the moon was in the sky. The chief thought to himself that he needed to quietly call for backup and that everything would be done while the stranger was waiting. The red man surprised everyone and said that he couldn't afford to wait a minute longer, so he grabbed the guard who had promised to show him where the truck was parked by his shirt. Using his strength and power, the red man began to jump high, holding the guard tightly in his hands. The guard was very frightened and was already saying goodbye to everyone in his mind. However, the red man surprised him and told him to stop struggling immediately and look ahead. The red man demanded that he immediately reveal the location of the elite goods and told him to do so as quickly as possible. 100 years ago, after the rebels failed to capture the country, they were exiled and forced to live in poverty to pay for their actions. When these people began to fight each other to protect what little they had left, their unity faltered. Soon, everyone began to think only of themselves, and their paths diverged. There were groups that had their own style, and these were the slums in the fashionable district. There was also a red light district and a memorial zone, and all of this was called the streets. There was a time when the descendants of the heroes who saved the country and its people ruled a huge corporation and lived in skyscrapers built on the ruins of the old city. They enjoyed safety behind the high walls surrounding them. As a symbol of great glory and wealth, they founded the city of the Blue Moon. Now, however, the red man saw no city of dreams, only crumbling buildings. The man saw how huge the place was, but it was nothing but ruins. The red man had heard that all the buildings in the city of the Blue Moon were built of gold, to which the guard replied that it was just a fairy tale and nothing more. The guard explained that this was because no one lived in the areas near the walls, as they could not be rebuilt. However, companies such as gourmet food stores had bought land here, and if the man wanted to see the buildings, he would have to go to the city center. For the young man, this was the whole problem, as it was an abandoned place and there was no one there who could save him. He really hoped that everything would be fine if he took the man to the center. He told the man to go straight ahead and then turn right. Someone appeared from the side and said that this was the wrong direction and that the man needed to turn left if he wanted to get to the gourmet shop. The guy broke out in a sweat because he didn't expect anyone else to appear. Kim was angry that someone had tried to deceive him. He began to speak very quickly, saying that he had made a big mistake and asking for forgiveness and permission to just live. He promised that he would never do anything like that again and would definitely take him to the right place. Kim thanked him for his help, but he was more interested in who this man was. The girl said hello and introduced herself as Panda, a middle school teacher in a fashionable neighborhood. She looked at the man, or rather at his clothes, and immediately realized that he was from the slums. Kim didn't quite understand what fashionable neighborhood she was talking about, which wasn't surprising for the girl since he was quite far from the slums. Panda said that the headquarters of the Finger Chain Gang was located in that very neighborhood. The man also introduced himself as Kim and said that he was a teacher in the slums. Panda thought that since they had the same job and were going to the same place, they should go together, and asked the man to take her with him. The guard listened to all this and didn't understand where another stranger had come from. The guy remembered very well that entering the city was a very serious crime that was punished with the full force of the law. The girl sat tied up on the cold floor, trying to understand where she was and what this place was. She began to remember that she was returning home from school as usual when a white truck appeared out of nowhere. The girl remembered that some strangers had lured her and her sister into that very truck. Looking around, she realized that her sister had probably been taken to another place, and discovered that her hands were tied, and she couldn't see anything because the room was dark. The girl heard a noise and realized that someone was coming towards her, so she froze. A moment later, the door opened and something that looked like a human being entered, but it had a very frightening appearance. This huge creature approached one of the bundles and hoisted it onto its shoulders without saying a word, only making growling sounds. The girl couldn't even breathe because she was so scared and just watched what was happening. She mentally called for help and began to realize what this giant was doing, or rather, who he was taking away. The girl did not immediately realize that there were other people in this place, and this made her even more afraid. She understood that the wrapped and folded bodies in this room were also people, but they had already passed away. The door began to open again, and the girl thought that he had come back for her, but a masked man appeared in the doorway who seemed delighted to have found her. The man realized that the girl in front of him was named Ray, and that she was the one he had come to save. He showed the girl an emblem, and she immediately recognized it as the symbol of a chain of fingers. He told Ray that the structure of this mission was too complicated, which is why he was a little late. However, the man assured her that she no longer needed to worry, as he was already there and would definitely take her back. The man wanted to untie the girl and continued to say that he understood perfectly how scared she was to be here alone, since she was essentially still a child. However, he couldn't seem to notice the most important thing. The girl tried as best she could to signal her rescuer, but he misunderstood and simply asked Ray to be a little quieter. He didn't want them to be discovered, but it was already too late. The man turned his attention to the front door and only then realized that they were not alone in the room. A mask was peeking through the doorway, and it was not as simple as it seemed at first glance. The mask detected the scent of an unfamiliar man, and the man himself was already holding his weapon at the ready. Realizing that he was about to fight a real monster, this monster decided that since there was a man in front of him, he could destroy him, and wished himself bon appetit. Something terrible opened its mouth and exposed its many sharp teeth, which were merciless. The law enforcement officer kept his promise and brought Kim and Panda to a gourmet shop. At the entrance, they were greeted by a man who introduced them to their main store, where they sell food with an unforgettable taste at affordable prices. Panda was surprised by the large assortment of their store because this place had everything: meat, vegetables, and even slaves. The guard admitted that this was also his first time in their main store. They were told that their store only sells products that have passed strict quality checks. Recently, in order to expand their business and open more branches, their store signed a contract with a large food company. The manager of the store decided to ask the boys if it was their first time there, and Panda replied that it was. He apologized to the visitors for the inconvenience and informed them that they were not accepting new visitors today, and that the store was only open for VIP guests or companies. He added that if they were regular customers, they could come back tomorrow. The guard also remembered this and said that this was indeed the case, and that the gourmet store was actually closed to visitors on Mondays. Panda couldn't help herself and said that this would be a little difficult. The other store employees turned to their manager and suggested that since the guys had already come, they could quickly sell them what they were interested in. Their gourmet store valued each of its valuable customers. The manager replied that unfortunately, due to the store's policy, he couldn't allow that. However, the man thought for a few minutes and decided to ask her what exactly they were interested in. Panda thanked him for the opportunity to find out what they wanted, and immediately asked about the sale of human flesh. The law enforcement officer, not listening to the essence of the matter, began to say that he had never heard of human flesh before. A few minutes later, the guy finally understood what the girl was asking, and his eyes widened in surprise. He tried to understand what Panda was talking about and thought it was crazy that anyone could buy something like human flesh in this store. Teacher Kim, wearing his mask, listened carefully and now realized that they had arrived at the right address. The store manager calmly replied that of course they sold such items, but their customers had never asked such questions before. This made the man suspicious, and he said that their visitors looked very suspicious. The store manager now demanded an answer as to who they were, and all of his staff gathered and stood at the ready, each with a weapon in their hands. Teacher Kim decided that everyone had forgotten about him, but he decided to remind them all. The man threw off his robe and growled that even in the slums, where there was nothing, they never resorted to such terrible things. The man was very angry and his mask changed slightly. He demanded an immediate answer as to where they were keeping their children. Panda asked Teacher Kim to calm down a little, as she knew that the gourmet shop did not treat the younger classes in such a way. The girl believed that even if they had kidnapped the children, they certainly hadn't sent them to their deaths right away. However, Panda believed that she needed to hurry because she was looking for teenagers. The girl answered all the questions from the law enforcement officer, saying that the most important thing was that their children were in this place. Panda also noticed that Kim's mask changed depending on his mood. Teacher Kim was almost certain that their children were probably very scared, and since they were in an unfamiliar place, were waiting for someone to rescue them. That was why they had to find them as soon as possible. The manager of the gourmet shop now realized that the guardians of the children who had been brought in yesterday had arrived. However, he did not understand how they had managed to get here. The man also said that these children were high-quality products, and that they would not allow them to be taken away under any circumstances. The gourmet shop manager ordered his people to immediately destroy these unwanted visitors. However, Teacher Kim, wearing his mask, was fully prepared to fight back. He was not only ready to fight back, but also attacked them himself, telling them that he would take the children no matter what. The gourmet store employees were very aggressive and realized that their opponent was very strong, so they decided to attack him all together. Without wasting a minute, they rushed into the attack and surrounded the man on all sides, trying to defeat him. However, after a few minutes, they realized that their weapons were not causing any harm to the man, and their surprise was written all over their faces. Kim growled back at them that even bullets couldn't hurt him, so he certainly wasn't going to die from some knives. The people only now began to understand that they were facing an invincible man whose wounds were healing on their own. The girl now understood why Mr. Kim had come here alone and wasn't afraid of anything. The law enforcement officer didn't know what to do, but Panda said that of course they would help Mr. Kim. The guard was confused because he didn't understand why he should help the troublemakers, but he couldn't stand on the side of the criminals because he was a city guard. The guy still couldn't figure out who to choose. At that moment, the girl was already fully engaged in the fight and was actively fighting the criminals. The city guard appreciated how good the girl was at attacking. Panda replied that the streets were a pretty dangerous place, so anyone who wanted to survive had to learn to stand up for themselves. In addition, Panda was convinced that a teacher should be strong not only in spirit, but also skilled in combat. At that moment, a huge crowd was already moving towards them, and Panda realized that they were outnumbered. Without hesitation, the girl made the only right decision, which was to run away as fast as she could. The gourmet shop was located in the basement of a restaurant and looked very expensive. The restaurant's management had decided that the main dish for tomorrow's reception would be scallop steak. The restaurant's head chef said that the sauce was a new recipe recently created by one of their chefs. A man tried the dish and flew into a rage, shouting that it was tasteless and didn't seem fresh at all. He was angry because they were expecting a very important guest the next day, and the Blue Moon was obliged to show the highest level of cuisine, but what he tasted was not even close to that description. The man yelled at the chef that he wanted the guest to enjoy a taste he had never experienced before. The chairman of the gourmet store chain, Hayalo, decided to find out about the girl they had recently brought in. The head chef said he was very sorry and that they didn't want to disappoint the man, but the girl had been picked up off the street. The chairman of Hayalo did not understand what the chef meant, because the girl was supposed to be the main course. Therefore, he demanded that she be brought to him immediately, as he was obliged to give their guests a proper welcome. At that moment, the city guard and Panda watched in awe as Teacher Kim skillfully dealt with all the villains. They were amazed because all those guys were flying above their heads and it was all done by one man. These guys thought he was a real monster, but Teacher Kim was sure that people who sell human flesh are the real monsters. Kim couldn't ask those people where they were keeping the children, and it was all because of the mask that somehow moved his body on its own. Panda said that he shouldn't worry because she knew where the children were. The teacher was surprised and didn't understand how the girl knew this information, and then Panda showed him her finger chain patch. With this patch, she was able to find out the location of the children using telepathy. Kim noticed that the girl knew very strange things, and only the head of the fashionable district was capable of such things, as he possessed superpowers and put them into the things he did. Panda didn't hesitate and started running in the direction they needed to go, and Teacher Kim rushed after her. The girl who had been kidnapped earlier was standing tied up in the middle of a stage under a blinding spotlight. She was very frightened because she heard that she was at the very center of an auction. She couldn't believe that she had just been put up for sale for 5 million yulves. The man who was conducting the auction repeatedly announced the various lots. The girl couldn't understand why they were doing this because she was just like them. The head chef knew that teenagers were very difficult to get hold of, which is why the prices at the auction were so incredible. These people sold everything, and every item purchased at the gourmet shop was personally prepared by the head chef and then served to customers. After a while, the host announced that, unfortunately, the auction was over, but that another surprise awaited all the guests. Their surprise was a man who came on stage and was ready to demonstrate all the goods sold to the guests more clearly. They organized a whole show and were very pleased with the reaction of their guests. At that moment, the girl hoped that it was all just a dream. She was scared and didn't want to die like this, and she was terrified that she didn't know what would happen to her sister. The girl also understood that the man who had tried to save her had been killed for no reason. The girl mentally begged and pleaded for someone to come to her aid. A moment later, a real miracle happened to her, all thanks to the man in the red mask who came to her aid. She was amazed and couldn't believe that a red-clad man was really standing in front of her. The girl was sure that the red man was just a fairy tale hero who had lived 100 years ago. Teacher Kim began to get angry because Panda said that his children were being held in this place, but he couldn't find anyone. Panda didn't understand because her badge pointed to this exact place and she couldn't be wrong. Suddenly, Panda saw the girl and recognized her as her student, Ray. It was an incredible stroke of luck. Ray saw Miss Panda and couldn't believe her luck because it meant that she would finally be saved. Panda saw how frightened the girl was and tried to calm her down and cheer her up. As soon as Ray's hands were untied, she could no longer hold back her emotions and rushed to hug her savior. Panda hugged the girl, looked at Mr. Kim, and said that she didn't think his children were in this place. Mr. Kim realized that it had been very foolish to assume that their children were somehow connected. Hayal, looking at all this, said that this was exactly why they shouldn't have gotten involved with kids from a fancy neighborhood and couldn't understand what kind of mess this was. Panda immediately recognized the man as the chairman of the gourmet store, and Mr. Kim was sure that he could find his children if he caught this man. The chairman felt confident because even the residents of Blue Moon didn't dare look him in the eye, let alone catch him. He believed that if a man in a red mask wanted to talk to him, he should first make an appointment. The chairman's guards were ready to protect their master and did not consider one man to be a serious threat. These armed men rushed at Teacher Kim all at once, each confident of victory, but they were in for a big disappointment. The chairman froze in surprise and couldn't believe his eyes that it was all over so quickly. Teacher Kim replied that he was ready to sign up for a meeting with him, but Hayalo would definitely not like it. Everyone in the room rushed to flee, realizing that the same fate awaited them. The chairman tried to understand what had happened and how one man could have sent all his guards to their deaths in such a short time. Hayal turned to the twins and told them to deal with the problem. The boys were ready to stop the man and protect their master at all costs. The twins immediately rushed into attack, but Teacher Kim was ready for this. The teacher did not perceive the twins as a threat, as they could not even get close to him. The chairman was so surprised that he stood up from his seat and no longer saw anything funny in the situation, because these twins were his strongest guards. The Red Mask grabbed the chairman and demanded an immediate answer as to where he was keeping his children. Hyalo replied that the child was actually in this room, but the man was asking about the 9 children from the slums whom he had recently kidnapped. The chairman finally understood who they were talking about, and it was not surprising to him because those children looked well, even though they had been taken from the slums. He realized that the man in the mask was their guardian and said that the children were not there, adding that the man would never be able to find them and advising him to simply give up. While Teacher Kim was engaged in conversation with the chairman, someone tried to attack him with a sharp blade. Rhea noticed everything and tried to warn the man of the danger behind him. The chairman was feeling confident as he once again felt in control of the situation. A huge man with a terrifying appearance attacked the teacher with his large, sharp knife. The chairman told the teacher that his children were now in the hands of people who were much more powerful than he was. These people had placed an order and wanted to get the children, not from the Blue Moon. They wanted children without relatives, or more precisely, children who, even if they disappeared, no one would look for them, and the children from the slums were just like that. The chairman added that all he had done was to take note of their requirements and provide them with children. The chairman told his man, after he had taken care of the man in the mask, not to forget to get rid of the uninvited guests. The man in the red mask picked out the most important part of all this, which was that his children weren't here. This meant there was no reason to stay with the chairman anymore. The girls who were watching closely from the sidelines saw that the man in the red mask was able to heal himself after any injury. The chairman couldn't believe that such a thing was possible because he had seen with his own eyes how the man had suffered serious injuries but somehow remained unharmed. The man in the mask stood there as if nothing had happened and said that it was all just fun for him, but that they were wasting his precious time. The man decided to settle the score with his opponent, and his actions caused such a loud noise that the girls couldn't stand it and covered their ears tightly. In the end, the huge man, who had inspired terror with his appearance alone, was now trembling with fear himself. The chairman ordered him to pull himself together and destroy the stranger immediately. He tried to obey his master's order, but he failed, and the masked man easily repelled him. The chairman had seen many monsters in his career, but the man in the mask surpassed them all. The teacher approached Hyalo and told him that no one could help him, but Hyalo began to shout that he was the chairman of the Blue Moon, and that if he sent him to the other world, he would become a criminal and lose his last chance to get his children back. The chairman offered the man a deal. He said he could help find his children since he surely wanted to know where they were, and Teacher Kim decided to find out what Panda thought about it. The girl replied that as far as she knew, even if he had power, he still couldn't contact people more powerful than him on his own. She thought it would be much faster if they asked the finger chain where the children were. Panda wanted to say that they no longer needed the chairman, and after saying this, she covered her students' eyes. The masked man considered this news simply wonderful because now he no longer had to restrain himself. The chairman was now useless to him and he could pay for all his actions. Ray remembered and told her teacher that the man from the finger chain had gone to the other world trying to save her. Panda decided to ask what the man looked like, to which Ray replied that he had a mask covering half of his face. The girl immediately understood who she was talking about and laughed that Ray had called him a man, since he was only 2 years older than her and had recently turned 21. Panda was sure that the man was all right. She explained that the guy's job was reconnaissance, or in other words, he was only supposed to sneak in and find Ray. Panda added that the guy had been given orders that if he thought rescue was impossible, he should just hand over his badge and retreat. She herself had to find her student, and that was the plan. Moreover, all members of the finger chain, including Panda, had been trained to control the city of the Blue Moon, so they couldn't be defeated so easily. Besides, Panda was sure that the guy had already returned to the fashionable district and was resting, so Ray shouldn't get depressed about it. Ray didn't understand, and the whole thing seemed very strange to her because she had seen with her own eyes how the monster had destroyed that guy. A moment later, fear was reflected on Ray's face because she realized that the terrible monster was still somewhere nearby. At that moment, the monster sensed the scent of the intruder and felt that he was weak but familiar. The man in the red mask stood in front of the monster and saw something that looked like a bean sprout that was still talking. After Teacher Kim destroyed the monster, he discovered the law enforcement officer and did not understand how he had gotten there. The law enforcement officer began to say that he had been trying to find children in that place when suddenly the monster attacked him. He also said that he fought with all his might, but unfortunately could not hold out for long. The man in the mask heard the most important part, which was that the security guard had run away, but the monster had caught up with him anyway. Panda and Rhea also approached them, and the man in the red mask became curious about where the girls were. Panda replied that they were in the chairman's office and that she now knew where to go next. The girl didn't hide anything and added that they should go to the giant food store. After hearing where they were going, the law enforcement officer couldn't hide his surprise. Panda explained that the giant food business and the gourmet food business were very similar, which is why the presidents had developed a good relationship. The relationship became so good that they were considered brothers. Gourmet food was able to rise so high solely thanks to the support of giant food. The girl also revealed that the two presidents exchanged information and therefore left traces. Giant Food was currently holding Ray Ramon and another Panda student captive. The masked man read the name of the student, Henjin, and it was just as strange to him as it was to Panda. Panda said that they were currently waiting for a response from the finger chain about the children's location. The man in the red mask demanded to know the route immediately, but Panda did not know it. The guard tried his best to dissuade them because the Giant Food was indeed very dangerous. He said that the chairman was one of the heroes of the past who had prevented the uprising. The guy tried to say that this was a completely different level, and they would not be able to defeat them, and everyone would die. The man in the red mask had no intention of backing down, and he didn't care who was stronger because all he could think about was how to save the people. He demanded an immediate answer from the guard, who, frightened, promised to show him the quickest way out. At that moment, Panda told Raya that she had to return home and was going to escort the girl to the passage that led outside. Ray felt the warmth of her teacher's hand, and it calmed her. However, the girl thought about the fact that a man who had lived 100 years ago was still alive and must be about 130 years old at that moment. The girl began to think that maybe that was why she felt relieved, and her eyes began to sting, and all her accumulated fatigue came flooding back. Because of this unpleasant feeling, Ray wanted to escape as quickly as possible and return home. Ray missed her school very much, as it held many warm memories for her. The girl missed her home very much, which was surely waiting for her. Ray couldn't understand why she suddenly felt better because Ramon was still suffering. Unexpectedly, even to herself, Ray asked the guys to take her with them. The guys were all surprised by this request because they all knew that it would be very dangerous there. Ray began to insist more strongly that she absolutely had to go, but the man in the red mask was categorically against it. She demanded that they take her with them because her sister was in the city, to which the teacher replied that it was up to him and Panda to decide. The girl argued with the man for a long time, and they couldn't come to a mutual decision, so she decided to ask Panda if she could go with them. Panda agreed, which enraged the man in the mask as he was still against it. The girl explained her agreement by saying that Ray was already an adult and, moreover, very cautious, and that Panda was sure that her student could be useful to them. Panda also argued that Ray had a special talent, and the Chain of Fingers had already expressed their opinion that the girl should accompany them when they went to sleep, Ramon. This decision was made because Ray wanted to protect her family more than anyone else. In the end, the man in the red mask said that they could do as they wished, but that they should not hold it against him for not stopping them. The law enforcement officer admired the girl and thought she was very brave. Ray thanked her teacher from the bottom of her heart for allowing her to go with them. Panda confessed to the girl that she actually wanted to stop her, but Ray had a special talent. Panda told the girl to defend herself to the best of her ability under any circumstances. At that moment, the man announced to the chairman that it was time to move on to the exquisite dishes. The chairman was in a hurry so that his brother would not wait too long for him. The guys went into an upscale store called Zipper and began to look around carefully. There were only a couple of similar places in the entire city, and in one of them, they were already being greeted by the managers. The man in the mask saw only a clothing store in front of him and did not understand why they had come here. Panda replied that it wasn't a regular clothing store and that they had come here for a reason. She showed the manager her badge and explained to the masked man that this store was a secret hideout in the fashion district inside the city. The manager asked what they wanted, to which Panda replied that she needed some help before she could go on her mission. The man was willing to help her, but to do so, they had to go into a secret room. This room was hidden from prying eyes, and no one could even imagine what lay behind the wall. The head of the fashionable district was handsome, and this woman had single-handedly turned a wasteland into a fashionable district. She was also always very wary of the City of the Blue Moon. Handsome knew that the City of the Blue Moon was corrupt, and she also knew that if the fashionable district was attacked, they would not be able to defend themselves alone. That is why she decided to form a group of people with superpowers called the Finger Chain, based on trust. The members of this group flooded the world to become Handsome's eyes, ears, hands, and feet. Ray didn't know this, and before that, she thought they were just members of a vigilante group combining two jobs. The Zipper clothing store operated undercover in the City of Blue Moon and also belonged to the Finger Chain. After a while, they all gathered in a secret room and discussed the whereabouts of the kidnapped children from the slums. The manager of the Zipper clothing store considered this a very serious matter and was willing to try to find out anything he could, simply because Panda herself had asked him to. The man in the red mask was grateful for any help in finding his children. Panda did not expect that a man like him would even know how to thank someone properly, as she had always seen him only in anger. The man became angry again, all because some city boys had dared to kidnap his children, and he was going to destroy them all. Unable to control his emotions, he slammed his fist on the table. His actions woke up Ray, who had just fallen asleep on the neighboring sofa. The store manager thought that Kim's story, how he single-handedly destroyed this huge, corrupt company, was impressive. He was glad that their group, which was fighting against the city, had such a strong ally. He said that to avoid surveillance, there weren't many Zipper hideouts in the city. However, they still hoped for a good outcome thanks to his outstanding abilities. Panda believed that their real problem was how the four of them would get to the giant meal. She thought that if they went on foot, they would immediately be spotted by surveillance cameras and the police would be called. Teacher Kim asked if they could engage them in combat, To which the store manager replied that unfortunately, their main priority was to work in the shadows of the city. They simply couldn't reveal themselves so easily. It could easily lead to a war between the city and the streets. The manager asked the man in the mask to try to avoid any clashes with the police if possible. The store manager, Zipper, really didn't like the presence of the law enforcement officer in their company because he didn't trust him at all. The law enforcement officer, trying to come up with some kind of plan to show that he was on their side, suddenly suggested something. He said that maybe they should try to sneak into the giant food store through its warehouse. Panda was interested in this option and asked the guy to tell her more about it. The law enforcement officer was referring to a bingo delivery service that specialized in delivering frozen food. That was why a pipe had been installed throughout the city to prevent the food from melting during delivery. The guy just didn't know if these pipes were connected to the giant food headquarters. However, if they tried to get through the pipes that connected all the districts, it would definitely be very dangerous. All the guys looked at the guy in surprise, as no one expected him to come up with such a good idea. Ray listened to all this while sitting on the couch and couldn't understand if the law enforcement officer was really on their side. The guy at the desk pointed out that the nearest bingo delivery was 10 minutes away. He told everyone that they wouldn't have to hide because the place was on the outskirts. Teacher Kim wanted to leave as soon as possible. Store manager Zipper asked Mr. Kim to get dressed before leaving. He believed that it didn't matter how well the man in the red mask tried to hide, because if he was walking around town looking like that, nothing good would come of it. The manager informed Mr. Kim that he had some clothes that would definitely suit him. A team of rhinos pulled a carriage, and it looked very impressive from a distance. Before the carriage arrived, the man hurried to spread out a red carpet to honor his master. A few minutes later, everything was ready, and the guards were lined up in 2 rows. The chairman arrived, and as soon as he got out of his carriage, he immediately smelled something. He said that he was already hungry from anticipating what Hiro had prepared for him. The chairman's assistant thought that something was very strange about today. He couldn't believe that the Gourmet Association hadn't answered the phone, and that no one had come out to meet them. However, just before entering the gourmet shop, they saw a man who had clearly been killed, and they immediately realized that something had happened there. As soon as the head chef saw Mr. Og and Mr. Bari, he rushed over to them. Barry decided to ask the employee what had happened, to which the chef replied that an unknown man in a red mask had killed Chairman Hiro and his subordinates, and then disappeared. The chairman's assistant suggested that the attack might have been carried out by a street gang, to which the chef replied that the man might have had accomplices, but that he had caused all the chaos on his own. The man added that the man in the red mask was a real monster, and no matter how many people attacked him, he was still fine. The cook said that he could not have stopped him, and therefore simply hid, and thus managed to survive. Chairman Og asked where the man had gone and heard that the man in the mask had headed toward the city center. The cook also remembered that one of the man's accomplices was a police officer, which was strange in itself. He also mentioned the girl in sunglasses and the teenage girl. Barry considered it a real problem that the police officer was with that guy, regardless of whether he was real or an undercover agent. In any case, the man considered all this information useful and thanked the head chef. It was very good for him that the news of this incident did not spread beyond the outskirts, but he needed to get rid of all the witnesses to the event, which he did. The chef couldn't understand why he was being treated this way, but Mr. Barry replied that it was nothing personal and that no one needed his services anymore, and sent the man to his death. Chairman Og was furious and tried to comprehend what had happened in this gourmet shop. He couldn't understand how someone could dare to kill his closest don in the city of the Blue Moon. Chairman Og ordered Barry to immediately find the person who had done this. Barry promised that he would find someone special to carry out this task. Panda stood behind the screen, waiting for Teacher Kim to get dressed, and she thought that the man was very lucky to have Hans's collection in this place. These clothes had the ability to absorb electrical discharges and repair themselves. The girl couldn't wait for Teacher Kim to come out and show her his outfit. Panda knew that this collection was so rare that it was impossible to buy it for any amount of money. They were all eagerly awaiting Mr. Kim's appearance, and he finally appeared. The man looked very masculine and enchanting in this outfit. He was ready to immediately set off in search of his children. The boy everyone called Rocky was dressed in uniform and looked slightly intimidating. People were lined up in front of him and greeted their captain in unison. Rocky informed them all that before they began their work, he wanted to convey a message that had come from the giant food. The message said that due to an accident at the main office of the Gourmet Association, the gourmet shop had been closed. He added that more detailed information would be provided once all the current logistical issues had been resolved. For now, Rocky told everyone to give it their all today. Rocky wanted his people to work hard so they wouldn't freeze in this refrigerator. The man wanted to know who they were, and in response, he heard that they were bingo delivery. After a quick reply, Rocky ordered the gates to be opened immediately and work to begin. A short time after the gates were fully opened, huge chunks of ice could be seen on the other side. The commander ordered the icebreakers to move forward and clear the way. The distribution team was also instructed to distribute certain goods through pipes, each of which was numbered. The captain saw that all his workers were in excellent shape and was proud of them. One of them looked at his captain's clothes and wondered how he wasn't cold. He replied that the cold was nothing compared to his enthusiasm, and that he could even be there without his top. However, the captain was distracted by the gates, which for some reason began to open. On the other side of the gate stood a man in a red mask who kindly wished everyone a good morning. 30 minutes earlier, the man in the mask couldn't understand how the workers could leave their belongings so carelessly, as someone could have taken them. Panda replied that there were no thieves inside the city. The policeman added that there were, of course, thefts, but no one had ever stolen clothes. Usually, competitors' account books were stolen. After arriving at the bingo delivery, the law enforcement officer remembered a story. Sanbei told this story to the young man. There was a sort of blacklist that some companies used. It was known that all the people listed there had simply disappeared, but after receiving reports from the families of the missing, the police conducted an investigation and found them. Sanbai had previously told the police officer that he had always been suspicious of the bingo delivery service. In general, the founder of the company seemed like a good businessman, but in reality, he was simply carrying out orders for destruction. Ria, hearing all this, thought that it was all too cruel for her. It was indeed cruel, as the head of the workshop was a fighter nicknamed Fierce and had been expelled for multiple killings. Panda decided that they should come up with a unified tactic, and she believed that this would be the right thing to do. The girl advised the man in the red mask to go ahead, and he agreed with her completely. When the workshop manager saw the visitors, he said that no one except employees were allowed in that room. The man in the mask did not intend to reveal any details and simply said that he was not an employee and did not work there. He suggested that the man try to stop him. He figured that since he was the one breaking the rules, he'd attack first, and he charged at him. The captain was thrown against the wall, leaving a large dent in the wall from the collision. The icebreakers saw everything and did not stand by, but instead rushed to the attack to help their captain. The man in the red mask was ready for this turn of events and put up a good fight. The workers were very surprised that the man had somehow managed to break the ice pick with his bare hands. They thought that he must have some kind of super strength. They all suddenly remembered that they were not ordinary guys, but bingo delivery men, and therefore would not back down under any circumstances. The masked man was ready for this and easily scattered all the workers. The masked man's team decided that while Mr. Kim was distracting all the workers, they should take advantage of the situation and make their way to their destination. They decided to look at pipe number 44 and became very attentive because, according to the map, there was a fork in the road ahead. They needed an employee to correct their direction. The guys realized that they needed to climb onto the ice cube and then they could leave. The police officer couldn't stay on his feet and slipped, and the girl advised him to be more careful. The employees noticed that there were still intruders in the room because the guys weren't wearing special shoes. Panda realized that there was no point in hiding anymore, so she took off her mask and called Teacher Kim. The girl wanted Mr. Kim to take them to the ice rink, but the man was unhappy that he had been assigned to cover for them, but they had been discovered anyway. Although Mr. Kim was indignant, he still complied with the girl's request and threw them all into the ice club. The man told them to go ahead and be more careful in the future. Teacher Kim used his strength to push their ice cube into the pipe they needed. The workers in the workshop saw that the uninvited guests had managed to get into pipe number 44 after all. However, they were able to get through the pipe so easily because there was a man in a red mask standing in their way. One of the workers said that the man in the mask would not bother with them because someone was already waiting for him. The man in the mask did not immediately understand what the other man meant, but in the next moment, the captain lunged at him. Teacher Kim did not expect the captain to survive their fight, and he looked very menacing. The masked man began to get angry because he believed that no one dared to stand in his way. The workshop captain had no intention of leaving his path and, on the contrary, was determined to stop and destroy him. At that time, an investigation was underway, and the young man was asking the police officer for some information. The police officer said that, at a certain time, he had approached the main gate to take over the shift, but 3 of his colleagues had disappeared. The law enforcement officer also said that one of his colleagues was not very talkative, and he did not know the guy very well. However, the other 2 guys were not the type of people to disappear without saying anything. A detective named Aston tried to investigate the case, but all the evidence had been destroyed, which only complicated matters. Aston had the feeling that someone had cleaned up the crime scene. He realized that an outsider had probably entered the city, but there were no records of the gates being opened or closed on the central server where all the data was stored. However, the detective realized that if they were dealing with someone with superhuman abilities, the only clue was the damaged central gate. The main gate was made of a special material, so it couldn't be repaired quickly. Aston thought that if he looked at it from another angle, it was immediately clear that the asphalt had only recently been laid. There was also a possibility that evidence had been destroyed inside the city. A police officer approached and told everyone to leave as they were being called back, and there was no need for them to remain there. He said it was just a minor incident and that all 3 had been found and dismissed for leaving their posts without permission. However, the detective knew that leaving the workplace was not that common. The police officer confirmed this and added that it was not such a big deal. Aston was very skeptical about what the police officer had said, but he still stood his ground. The police officer said that if the guy still didn't believe him, he could ask his superiors directly. He added that he was well aware of his influence, but still asked him not to interfere. As he was leaving, the officer was a little angry because he believed that although Detective Aston had authority, it did not give him the right to interfere in the investigation. At that moment, the guys from the bingo delivery service wanted to get rid of their unwelcome guests as quickly as possible. Rhea, like the rest of her team, fought back against the attackers and was still very angry. The girl believed that if the police officer hadn't slipped a little earlier, they would have been able to get to where they needed to go safely. The police officer tried to justify himself and began to say that he wanted to help Mr. Kim, but Rhea did not believe a word he said. She had already begun to think that he had done it on purpose to hinder them. The officer asked her not to insult him like that. He believed that the girl had unfairly accused him of being an accomplice to the crime. Another man joined them who thought that the two had chosen the wrong time for their arguments and conversations. A moment later, they were distracted by the fact that their ice floe had been cut in half by skates, and they were now on different pieces of ice. The policeman arrived in horror as he was now alone on the ice floe and did not know what to do. Panda suddenly realized that she had miscalculated because she was sure that the man who was fighting with Teacher Kim was the most important person there, but the boss was right in front of them. This man said that, to be more precise, he was from another company but held a higher position. Standing before them was Cha Min, the freezer supervisor. Cha Min couldn't understand how these people had even thought of getting involved with the partner of Bingo Delivery's freezer. He couldn't imagine who had hired these people. Panda no longer stood aside but rushed into the attack, but still shouted to the man that she was not a mercenary but a teacher. Cha Min thought it was some kind of stupid joke and was sure that since they had run away, they must be weak, but he was surprised to find that this was not the case at all. He thought to himself that they were very similar to this woman. The delivery workers rushed to help and asked the respected supervisor to be very careful. Cha Min didn't understand how it was that the workers he had brought with him were only getting in the way. He decided that he should be more careful. Panda was sure that being more careful wouldn't help that man much, because she had never lost a one-on-one fight before. At that moment, the law enforcement officer was sitting on his block of ice, thinking about the words Rhea had said to him, or more precisely about the fact that the girl had accused him of falling on purpose. The policeman was unhappy that she had been so observant, because he understood what the consequences would be if he helped people from the streets. He was even glad that he had ended up alone on this pipe that led to a completely different place. The man in the red mask continued to fight his opponent, never ceasing to be amazed by the captain's strength. The captain believed that fighting city boys wasn't much fun because they used various complex techniques when attacking. He was convinced that real men should fight like this. The man in the mask replied that he was not interested in his philosophy and decided that it was time to end the conversation. So he rushed into the attack, hoping that he would soon win and continue the search for his children. The captain couldn't hide his excitement at the battle. However, the masked man didn't like this and became even more aggressive. The man in the red mask was not interested in anything except his children, who were probably very frightened and waiting for someone to rescue them. For some reason, the captain decided that the masked man was married and said that this was a big surprise to him. The masked man did not react to these words, but the fact that the captain was still alive confused him, as anyone else in his place would have been dead long ago. Kim realized that the man probably also had superpowers. The captain did not hide it and said that he had the ability to convert damage into muscle mass. The man in the mask did not like this news very much. The battle resumed, and it was clear that the two men had only become more hostile toward each other. The captain believed that it was time for the masked man to admit that he could not win this battle. It was well known that in battles between people with superpowers, the most important factor was whether your superpower was superior to your opponent's abilities. The captain was sure that he was superior to the masked man in every way, and therefore no one could compare to him because every attack only made him stronger. He was very curious to see what the man in the red mask would do next. Their battle was not over, and each of them was still trying to win, not giving up or surrendering. The captain noticed that his opponent was no longer fighting so desperately, and thought that, judging by everything, he had lost the will to continue. Kim himself began to realize that he was at a disadvantage. Kim realized that he couldn't continue mindlessly attacking someone who was only getting stronger. The captain saw that the man in the red mask, instead of exchanging attacks, had decided to try to take him down with a hold. He realized that the man in the mask had decided to use grappling to overcome his abilities, and considered the whole idea very ridiculous. The captain was sure that he was not a professional martial artist. The captain thought that the masked man's plan was not bad, but he did not have enough skills to carry it out. Kim held his opponent in a tight grip and had no intention of deviating from his plan. The captain, however, did not understand what the masked man was trying to achieve with all these actions, because nothing would change anyway. He was sure that no matter how hard the stranger tried, he would still win in the end. The captain couldn't resist commenting that the situation was getting hotter and hotter. However, the masked man had a different opinion, and decided that it was time for his opponent to cool off a little in deep freeze, where he dragged him. The man didn't understand how the masked man had managed to put him there without him even noticing. Kim set the freezing temperature to maximum. Kim decided that the best thing to do would be to destroy his opponent using the same method he had used on other people. The captain tried to hold the closing doors and shouted that the man in the mask should not dare to run away from the battle like this. Kim replied that he wasn't running away and threw him into the freezer with a powerful attack. The masked man added that he had simply lost but didn't realize it yet. The doors to the freezer closed tightly, meaning that the masked man's plan had worked. The captain didn't want to give up and tried to reach the masked man through the wall with his hand. Kim thought this man was terrible and hoped that not all people with superpowers were like him. At that moment, the battle between Panda and the supervisor continued on one of the ice floes. Rhea was very worried about her teacher and had no idea that her teacher was so good at fighting. This was because Panda usually either relaxed or played around. She also noticed that her teacher's opponent was very strong, and in her opinion, Panda was at a disadvantage. With one of her attacks, Panda managed to knock the guy off a block of ice and he began to fall. The supervisor was quicker and managed to return to his original position, but he noticed that the girl's attempt was not bad. The man used his shoes, which were equipped with sharp blades, to cut through the block. Rhea lost her balance from the impact and began to slide, and since she had nothing to grab onto, she began to fall. Help came unexpectedly for the girl from the same guy who managed to catch her in time. The guy was angry with Panda because he believed that she should not have taken the teenager on such a dangerous mission. He believed that the girl did not deserve to call herself a teacher because she did not care about the safety of her students. Panda had nothing to say in response because the guy was completely right. The guy believed that now the difference between them was clear because he was sure that if he had used all his skills, the girl would have been dead long ago. The supervisor added that he was willing to spare her life if she surrendered voluntarily to the police. Panda looked at the guy and suddenly said that he had become much stronger than he used to be, calling him Cha-Min, which puzzled him. The guy was sure he hadn't told the girl his name and now looked a little confused. Panda smiled at him and said that it was about time he finally remembered her. Cha-Min said that it was all very funny and that the girl did look similar, but he was still sure that they were completely different people. He couldn't believe that the most perfect girl he knew could be so impulsive and illogical. His words hurt Panda so much that she was lost for a few minutes. Panda snapped out of her stupor and started to get angry because she thought he wasn't the only one who could show off his skills. After the guy behaved so arrogantly, she was going to teach him a lesson. To make matters worse, the guy added that the girl had never behaved so frivolously, which only provoked Panda even more. He was sure that it wasn't her and kept repeating this about the girl without stopping. Panda activated her ability and used her density, then smiled at the guy. The girl was curious to see if he would continue to be stubborn even after that. The supervisor noticed that the ice around him was like jelly and realized that it was actually density. A moment later, the ice hardened again, and now the guy was no longer so sure of his words. Panda possessed a superpower that allowed her to control the hardness of objects, or more precisely, their density. The girl sat down next to the guy and asked him if he believed her now or if he still refused to admit it. The supervisor looked at the girl and said that it was true that many people said that people changed throughout their lives. That's why the guy told Panda that she had changed a lot since they last saw each other. The girl replied that there was no point in all these kind words because she hadn't forgotten how he had given her different definitions. She was angry that the guy was talking like that to colleagues he hadn't seen in a long time. Rhea stood behind the girl and couldn't believe that her teacher had been colleagues with this guy. Panda Talk now realized that he hadn't told his student anything. The girl said that she was originally from the Blue Moon, which greatly surprised Rhea. At that moment, the policeman, moving on his block of ice, finally felt the long-awaited freedom. Although the road was certainly confusing and it was difficult for him to find a way out of this maze. However, the guy was happy and all he had to do was get out of there and report everything to the authorities. It was not meant to be for the guy, as the guys were waiting for him at the exit and told him they were tired of waiting. Surprise froze on the policeman's face for a few minutes, and he couldn't understand how this had happened. The panda, as if nothing had happened, began to tell him that they had started to worry that he had been gone so long, but they were glad that he had made it back safe and sound. The man in the red mask approached the policeman and asked what had happened to his expression and what had surprised him so much. The law enforcement officer tried to pull himself together and replied that he was just very happy to see them all. A girl named Henjon was very happy to see her best teacher and ran to meet him. Henjon was a child who always smiled brightly and looked a little like a sunflower. The teacher was also happy to see the girl running toward him, but asked her to be careful or she would fall. A moment later, that is exactly what happened. She fell while running with joy. Henjon got a small scrape when she fell, which the teacher thought needed to be treated. The girl was in the office, sitting quietly while her teacher treated her scratch. The man was sure that if So-Yoon had been sitting in Hyunjun's place, she would have cried. The teacher asked his student to be more careful next time so she wouldn't get hurt. Brave Hyunjung, who never cried no matter what happened, had one secret that only her teacher and the principal knew about. The man in the red mask was distracted from his memories by Panda, who began to worry a little about him. The girl told the man that Cha-Min had already woken up and that they all needed to talk to him. Their conversation took place in the recreation room, where the guy was categorically against it. Panda tried to explain that she wasn't asking anything special of the guy, just to pretend that he didn't know they were here. Cha-Min replied that the entire country depended on the pipes here, and he did not understand how he could pretend that he knew nothing if the guys were planning to attack the Blue Moon. He was sure that if this became known, the entire city would be in an uproar. Teacher Kim said that since the guy was being stubborn and didn't want to cooperate, he would go to the other world right there. The man in the red mask decided to clarify to the boy that they weren't asking him for anything, but simply giving him a chance which he was refusing to take. Not only did Cha-Min's fate depend on the supervisor's answer, but also the fate of those outside the room. The man in the mask simply warned the guy that this might not end well for everyone. He also decided to clarify one point and let the guy know that he was still alive only because Panda wanted him to be. Panda added that this was her wish because they had been colleagues in the past and she didn't want to resort to extreme measures. After these words, Chamin fell silent and did not comment further. The guy was thinking very hard about something. The masked man looked at the guy and couldn't decide whether to leave the supervisor unharmed or send him to the other world. He decided to clarify one point with Panda and asked if the girl was defending Chamin only because they were both from the same city. Panda immediately replied that this was not the case, as she had left that city a long time ago and settled in a fashionable neighborhood. The girl added that she had no attachment to the city. She thought it would be strange if the bingo delivery service, famous for its fast delivery, suddenly stopped, so in her opinion, it was better to pretend that nothing had happened. Besides, Panda was sure that she knew Chamin very well. Panda knew that despite Chamin's strength, he actually had a kind heart, and therefore, if they left him unharmed, he would ultimately come over to their side. Chamin stopped resisting and agreed, but in return asked that his employees be kept safe. The masked man replied that this would not be a problem as long as he played by their rules. Rhea, listening to the whole conversation, suddenly realized that everything had turned out just as Panda had said. After that, everything went smoothly and they were able to make their way deeper into the city through the pipe. The bingo delivery workers following Chamin's orders pretended that the kids weren't there at all. Rhea found it surprising that not a single worker even began to protest. The policeman explained that it was because the townspeople were used to following orders from above. The man in the red mask decided to check with the panda to make sure that Chamin had told them the truth. The panda believed the guy's words and knew that he had no reason to lie to them at that moment. Chamin heard the story from the guys and thought that the kidnapping of the children was a disgrace to the city of the Blue Moon. The guy said he couldn't help them personally, but he was willing to pass on some information. Chamin decided to tell the guys that the giant food they were heading for wasn't real. He told them that the headquarters most people knew about was fake and was only used as a cover for business. There was a real headquarters where Chairman Og held his meetings. Chamin found this out when he visited the fake headquarters several times for work. Unfortunately, however, he did not know the location of the real one. The masked man decided to find out if the guy he had just fought with knew where the real headquarters was. Panda wondered aloud whether they should unfreeze the guy after hearing this news. Teacher Kim was very surprised that they could do such a thing, to which Panda replied that she was just joking. At that moment, the police officer decided to intervene and said that if they couldn't find out the location from external sources, then they could ask someone who worked in the shadows. He decided to look in his notebook and find such a person right away, and the police officer was sure he could do it quickly since the industry was originally quite small. Interesting events were unfolding at the service company Cas Plus. A young middle manager named Haran was furious and couldn't understand how they dared to touch him. The guy was sure that now they wouldn't get off so easily. Haran had no doubt that his bodyguards were already looking for him, along with the police. These words only made the men laugh, and one of them was very curious why all the people who ended up in this place always said the same things. The same man looking at Haran wanted to explain why they were doing this. He didn't say too much, simply replying that it was because they could afford to. The man knew that the police wouldn't care if a medium-sized business that had just gotten off the ground suddenly disappeared. He decided to explain to Karan why his name was on the blacklist and said that it was because some people in high places didn't like his business. The men were suddenly distracted from their work by a stranger wearing a red mask. They noticed that the guy was slightly larger than their men and thought he was probably Huran's bodyguard. Huran looked at the man in the mask and didn't know who it was, as there was no one like him among his bodyguards. The man in the mask replied to everyone at once that he had nothing to do with Haran, that he had just stopped by to ask something. One of the villains decided that in that case, the masked man should explain everything in more detail, but next to Haran. This was because the stranger had seen this place, and they weren't going to let him leave so easily. At that moment, the man ordered his men to immediately seize the stranger. He no longer paid any attention to the stranger because he had something to discuss with Karan. While the man was distracted, a window was broken and he turned around again. The man named Hennem, hearing the noise, was sure that it was the work of his men and began to get angry at them, as he had ordered them to bring the stranger to him. The masked man said with a hint of irony that he hadn't followed Panda's request to be as quiet as possible. He had made noise and thrown the guys out the window. Teacher Kim knew that they were still on the outskirts and that no one would be able to pass by. Hennem was taken aback at first and became confused, but then ordered his men not to stand aside but to grab the stranger and do it immediately. The men were armed and rushed to carry out the order they had received. The masked man decided that he could make some noise inside and easily repelled the attack of the men. The men saw what the masked man was doing and immediately realized that he had incredible super strength. Teacher Kim spared no one and threw them one by one into different corners of the room with his attacks. He was even slightly disappointed because these people turned out to be even weaker than the guys from the bingo delivery service. Hennem stood there and couldn't believe his eyes. The man was amazed that one person could do such a thing. The man decided to try to curry favor and immediately became very polite and calm, hoping that it would help him. This did not help Hennem, and in horror he cowered in a corner, towered over by a man in a red mask who still wanted answers to his questions. After that, the man in the mask shared the latest events with the guys. The policeman was very surprised because the man had first attacked those men and only then decided to ask about the giant food. Teacher Kim replied that he couldn't let some unknown guys grab him, so he decided to teach those guys a lesson. At that moment, there was commotion on the street, and one of the guys looked very agitated and ordered his men to move faster because they had to save his brother. One of the guys tried to gently hint to the boss that he thought it was too late, but the boss didn't want to hear it. The young middle manager named Hawk was convinced that his brother couldn't have done all this for nothing. Hawk had no intention of backing down, so he and his men burst into the room, convinced that this was where his brother was being held. Huran heard the noise and then saw his brother coming to his aid and couldn't believe it. Hawk saw the bruises on his brother's face and was concerned about his condition, but Huran insisted that he was fine now. The young leader Hawk was furious that someone had dared to leave all these marks on his brother's face. The man had no intention of letting it go, and was determined that everyone responsible would pay for what they had done. Hanim appeared unexpectedly and greeted the new arrivals, but the man's appearance was impressive. Hawk did not expect this and did not understand who had spoken so eloquently to Henny, but the result was clear to see. Huran told his brother to greet Mr. Kim and added that this man had saved his life. The brothers immediately bowed their heads low before Mr. Kim and thanked him for his help. Huran wanted to repay the man for saving his life at any cost. Teacher Kim was not impressed and told the brothers to be quiet as he was busy with something else at the moment. At that moment, all the guys were calling everyone they could and trying to find out the information Mr. Kim needed as quickly as possible, and they were willing to pay any price for it. The man in the red mask approached Tanim to find out if he had learned anything and received a negative answer. The man was clearly dissatisfied with this answer, and Henrim felt the full force of his threat. Kim warned that if Henrim still wanted to live, he'd better hurry up. Hawk watched the whole conversation and looked a bit confused. Hawk didn't understand what Mr. Kim was trying to achieve. And then his brother replied that he was trying to find out where the secret headquarters of the giant food company was located. Kim overheard their conversation and was surprised, as he had no idea that the current headquarters was fake, and then they explained to him that this was very common among corporations. Hawk decided to intervene after all, and apologizing to Mr. Kim, said he was ready to help him with this matter. He warned that it would not be easy to find the hidden building of a large company through these villains, and therefore advised Mr. Kim to check the place he was about to show him. Mr. Kim decided to clarify whether this would be more effective and was ready to hear the details. Hawk was sure that if the giant food company was hiding its headquarters, it would most likely be a tall building. He believed that the pride of the old men of the Blue Moon would not allow them to place their headquarters in a small building. Therefore, the man said that it would be easier than easy for someone like him to find any suspicious building, provided of course that they knew its dimensions. Hawk wanted to repay his brother for his help in this way. Hawk thought that if he succeeded, they would no longer owe anything to this suspicious guy. He knew that his brother was an excellent businessman, but too emotional, so he might give everything away, and he wanted to prevent that. Huran didn't expect anything else from his brother and thought it was wonderful that they could help Mr. Kim in this way, even to the point of studying the premises of the building. He was sure that they would find out everything. Hawk was angry because he thought his brother was out of his mind, since he was already almost on the blacklist. The man simply did not understand how his brother could help someone else when he was on the verge of destruction. Huran just wanted to help his savior. The man in the red mask said that he would take care of exploring the premises himself and that Huran should save his own life. Huran considered this a very generous gesture on Mr. Kim's part and therefore remained indebted to him. His brother tried to pull Huran away while he shouted his gratitude to his savior and promised that if Mr. Kim ever needed help in the future, he should just look for Huran. The man in the red mask turned to some people and said he had some work for them. He turned to the illegal services of Mega Hammer and wanted these people to inspect the building. Mr. Kim also approached an underground arms dealer called Chicken House with the same request. The man in the mask did not pass by a man nicknamed the Cleaner, who was the one who disposed of those who had been killed. He gave the same task to the hitmen known as Blank, but none of them even considered carrying out the assignment. Mr. Kim realized that it would not work out peacefully and that force would be necessary. He went through each of them to make his request as convincing as possible, and after a while, all of the guys were ready to do whatever was required. The policemen thought that everything was falling into place so easily and that at this rate they would soon be able to find the location of the headquarters of the giant food company. Panda thought it was great that Kim was meeting with his brothers because they were both known as brilliant entrepreneurs, and judging by what they said, they could really help them. The man in the red mask completely agreed with the girl and was very worried that too much time had already passed. He thought about the girl, Henjin, who was probably scared, but asked her to wait a little longer and that he would definitely save her soon. At that moment, sitting at the table, the guy was playing card games with the girls and Ramo Ani won this time. The guy couldn't believe that she was playing all this for the first time. Ramo Ani replied a little fearfully that she had never played card games before. The boy leaned over the winner and said that if she cheated, she would not grow up to be a good adult. Ramo Ani repeated that she was not cheating and was telling him the truth. Another girl looked trustingly into the guy's eyes and asked when they could go home. He replied that childcare workers like him didn't know the answer to that question, and he was no exception. The bell rang again, and Ramu Ani noted that it was already the 56th time. The girl said that she was having a lot of fun playing with her uncle and Ani, but she missed her family very much. The children were still feeling very depressed from being in the same room all the time, as they were not allowed to leave. The boy suddenly asked the girl if she had any family, to which she replied that she had her teacher Yura Ani, her older brothers, and her aunt Soen and Miri. He believed that a teacher was a profession, not a family member. The girl was convinced that they were her family. The boy told the children that it was very dangerous outside at the moment because every night a monster in a red mask came from the street and killed people. He added that it would be much safer for them to stay in this room. The boy had also heard that among the monster's accomplices was a woman wearing sunglasses. Honey perked up a little when she heard about the woman in sunglasses, thinking that it might be her teacher, Panda. The guy, apparently noticing Ani's interest, decided for some reason to say that the woman had been sent to the other world. Ani didn't believe him and was sure that he was lying, so the guy admitted that he was just joking. However, he noticed that the girl wasn't very surprised. The boy immediately guessed that one of the people he had mentioned was probably familiar to her. He decided that he wanted to tell this child a funny fact that would surely interest her. The guy leaned over the girl and told her that he was also from the streets and knew many of the nuances. He was sure that it was impossible to betray someone with whom they shared their homeland. Ani looked at the guy, and although she looked very confused, she thanked him anyway. The man who entered the room saw the guy named Rojul again, and told him to leave immediately. Rojul told the children that it was time for him to leave, but promised that they would see each other again soon. The chairman's assistant noticed that Rojul had been with these children for several days in a row, and now wanted to know if the guy had managed to win their trust. Rojul replied that he had only visited the children because he was bored. The chairman reminded him that all these children were just ingredients, and that he shouldn't bother with them so much. The guy suddenly decided to say that he had something else for Barry, and added that he wanted 1,000,000 yolvs for the information. Barry was shocked because the guy hadn't even said what information he was talking about, but was already demanding so much money for it. Rojul didn't seem confused and simply replied that if Barry didn't want to pay, he didn't have to. But at that moment, he received the amount of money he had demanded. The guy then told Barry that the people who attacked the Gourmet Association were from a fashionable neighborhood and were looking for these children. Rojul added that, judging by everything, the man in the red mask was unknown to the two girls. He suggested that the man might be a mercenary from the red light district, as there had been a case of an attacker in a red mask several years ago. Barry believed that in that case, they should prepare in advance, and added that it would now be Rojul's job. The assistant chairman handed Rojul an impressive wad of cash and told him to eliminate those people, promising him even more money if he succeeded. Rojul just didn't understand where he was supposed to find them, if no one knew their location. Barry replied that it was no longer his problem, but he hoped that the guy would be able to handle the task assigned to him. He considered Rojul the best mercenary and believed that if anyone could handle this task, it would definitely be this guy. Rojul said that the best praise for him was money. Rojul decided it was time to end the conversation because he needed to go hunting. Teacher Kim was furious because they had made another mistake, and he was sure that the headquarters of the giant food was here. However, it turned out to be just the lair of some criminals. Panda tried to calm the man down and said that they had simply been misled by false information leaked from the giant food. Rhea couldn't believe that those people knew they were coming, but the policeman replied that this wasn't the case, as it had all been done to prevent police checks. The masked man realized that he should have left Zipper information about Henzon. Panda believed that since the number of Zipper's agents was limited, even a simple search for his children would be an impossible task. Panda suggested that the man first find a place where they could hide from prying eyes. Rojul watched the boys closely from the roof of a neighboring house and noticed every detail. Chairman Og sat at the head of the table, which was groaning under the weight of food, and it was this food that the man was devouring. Bari approached and greeted his chairman, but he looked slightly ridiculous against the backdrop of the man. The assistant inquired about the chairman's well-being. Mr. Og replied that he was feeling much better today, and that even the doctor had noted that his condition had stabilized. Barry believed that in that case, they simply had to hold a special ritual this week. The assistant wanted to know if the chairman had chosen any of the children to be used as special additions to the ritual. The chairman was still undecided, so Barry reminded him that he could only choose one ingredient, as his body might not be able to handle two. Barry also said that those who had sent Chairman Hiro to the other world were looking for a girl named Ramo. The man did not think that anything would happen, but he believed that they would need a hostage in case the situation took a turn for the worse. Chairman Og thought about these words and decided to use this girl. The policeman checked the records and told everyone that there were only 2 places left where they believed the headquarters could be located. He reported that the first location was a company that manufactured displays called Everpad. The second location was a company that sold mineral water called Mineral Mountain, and one of them was a disguised headquarters. The man in the red mask thought that Mineral Mountain looked too suspicious, and did not understand why they needed such a large building if they were just selling water. He did not understand why they were selling water at all. He was told that it was because rebels had poisoned the water near the city of Blue Moon during the battle. Since then, all residents had been forced to buy drinking water, and the company that had occupied this niche first had grown significantly during that time. The policeman didn't understand why the brothers had included such a famous company on the list. However, the guy thought there was something Mr. Kim should know before going to both of these places. The guy said that Everpad and Mineral Mountain were both located close to each other. The police officer added that, on top of everything else, both companies were located very close to the center. So if Mr. Kim decided to cause a commotion in one of them, he would certainly attract attention. Mr. Kim took all this as if they had only one chance left. An unknown voice said that they should not worry too much, as both places were headquarters for a giant food company. The stranger added that since Chairman Og was a fan of rhinos, he had ordered the buildings to be constructed in the shape of horns. This man believed that the resemblance was impossible to miss. The man in the red mask was curious about who this stranger was. The man stepped out of the shadows and introduced himself as Rojul, though many knew him as Purple. The policeman heard the nickname Purple Man and froze in surprise. After realizing who the stranger was, Panda approached Mr. Kim and said that they needed to leave as soon as possible. Kim paid attention to the young man's words and thought that he clearly knew something about the headquarters. Rojul climbed down from the roof of the building closer to the guys and said confidently that he knew everything. Purple did not hide the fact that Chairman Og had sent him to kill them all. Rojul didn't waste any time and used his best weapon, which was a playing card. The man in the red mask immediately realized that he was being attacked and didn't stand aside. Purple was much quicker and faster, and his playing card struck a blow that did not miss Mr. Kim. Rojul said that he had once had to catch a mercenary from the red light district. Panda did not stand aside, and while Rojul was distracted by Mr. Kim, the girl decided to attack from behind. Purple did not immediately notice the girl's approach and thought that she was probably also a mercenary. Despite this, Rojul knew that the girl was still much slower than his hands. Purple played another card, which left a large dent in the wall. The policeman was still in a state of shock and couldn't believe that he was actually seeing Purple in front of him. It was well known that the inhabitants of the city of the Blue Moon did not like anyone who came from the streets, but there was a system for granting citizenship to distinguished street dwellers. This was only on the condition that they had to wear a purple collar. Rumors circulated among the people that Purple, chosen on the battlefield, was also called the Reaper. Rojul didn't even turn around, but immediately sensed the presence, or rather, in his opinion, a parody of a policeman hiding behind the wall. Purple decided to lure the guy out of his hiding place using the same playing cards. The playing cards attacked the policeman, who ran out of his hiding place in terror. Purple told the guy to wait for him a little while, but the man himself was sure that he could get into real trouble if he sent a real cop to the other world. Rhea stood aside and watched everything, and she didn't exactly disapprove of the cop's behavior. On the contrary, she despised it. The girl saw that Purple was heading in her direction and was overcome with fear, as she didn't know what to expect. Perp bent over the girl and couldn't help but notice the resemblance to a girl named Ramo, and suggested that they might even be related. Rhea did not expect this man to know Ramo and was very curious about how they had met. Purple replied that he knew Ramo and added that they were best friends. The man handed the girl a red rose, which only confused her. Purple immediately guessed that she was Ramo's older sister, and said that he had already heard about her as an outstanding student. Purple now wondered what to do, as he did not want to quarrel with Ramo because of her older sister. The man was sure that destroying a member of his friend's family would clearly be wrong. However, Purple believed that it was not worth dwelling on this, as he and Ramo would soon be sent there as well. In Kim's diary, there was a memory of a girl named Soen crying bitterly because she had a terrible dream, and her teacher was trying to calm her down. Soen said that she had dreamed that there were 3 moons in the sky, which had frightened her greatly. A girl named Henjin also decided to join them and climbed onto Kim's back because she wanted to play cicada. The man in the red mask prevented the man from attacking Rhea and covered her with his body, thus saving her. Purple did not expect to see the red light district mercenary again, as he thought he had long since passed away. Teacher Kim took the blow for the girl, scaring her badly. That was why Kim had told Rhea not to go with them and not to get involved. Purple stood and watched the unharmed man in the red mask and realized that he was not so simple. The man realized that the man in the mask was virtually invulnerable, and that he had never even heard of anyone with such resilience. Panda wanted to get to Perp to make him pay for what he had done. Panda tried to attack the man, but he sensed her presence and already had a playing card ready. The girl couldn't reach her target because she was thrown back by the shockwave. Perp, as if nothing had happened, pondered how he could defeat the man in the mask. He thought it would be right to destroy the man over and over again until he was unable to recover. He understood that this was most likely because the guys wanted to save Ramo so badly. However, Perp did not understand where they got such confidence that everything would go smoothly in the city of the Blue Moon. Perp was waiting to meet the guy in the red mask who, according to rumors, had destroyed their subcontractors in an instant. The guy really wanted them all to be a little stronger, but it was what it was. Rhea noticed that Kim had been wounded many times and was unable to fully recover, so she decided that she had to buy some time for him at all costs. The girl therefore asked Purple what he meant when he said he would send Ram there too. Perp only now realized that there was something these guys didn't know and decided he was ready to tell them everything. The guy decided to tell them why the giant food needed Ramo. The guy didn't beat around the bush and told the guys straight up that the girl named Ramo was an ingredient. Purple told them that Chairman Og had been diagnosed with an illness and that the man was already over 100 years old, which was quite a lot. He also told them that the medical technology of the Blue Moon City allowed such diseases to be treated fairly quickly. However, this disease was related to Chairman Og's abilities, and therefore it could not be cured by conventional methods. Chairman Og was one of the heroes who had managed to stop a rebellion in the past. The man had only survived thanks to his innate strength, but his illness was no joke. The man grew stronger to fight the advancing disease and sought out more and more unusual flavors to at least temporarily forget his discomfort. Chairman Og's life grew worse with each passing day. That was until one day a brilliant scientist appeared and offered an effective cure. The scientist advised him to find a girl who matched the sample provided by more than 90%, after which he promised that he could make the medicine. Chairman Og used his power and money to search the entire city, but unfortunately he was unable to find a suitable candidate. Then something incredible happened. Chairman Og won the lottery. Among the children kidnapped from the streets, there were two who fit the description. The chairman wanted to use one of these children for his own purposes. Rhea listened to all this and couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was supposed to be a pleasant bonus for the chairman, which he had no intention of giving up. Purple thought that now he had definitely satisfied the girl's curiosity, as he had told her everything in detail. The man added that this was his gift to her before she went to the other world. Rhea was beside herself with rage, as she couldn't understand how such a thing could be allowed to happen. She was sure that she and the others would do everything in their power to prevent anyone from laying a finger on Ramo and Henzon. The masked man joined their conversation and said that everything was as Rhea had said. The man warned that if there was even a scratch on the children, he would personally destroy everyone involved. Purple tried to attack the masked man, but he was too quick. Rajul couldn't believe his eyes, and he was surprised to find that his playing card was stuck. The man in the red mask could barely contain his anger and believed that their card game was over. The man put all his anger into his attack and aimed it at Purple, so that he would finally get what he deserved. Purple saw how determined the man was and realized that he had to use all his strength to block the attack. The young man took a beating from the man in the mask and couldn't understand where he got so much strength in one attack. Purple noticed that after the man's mask broke, his physical strength increased many times over. The masked man didn't want to hear anything else and immediately rushed into attack, but the guy managed to dodge it and hide behind a building using his playing card. Purple requested a timeout and asked him to honor it. The guy simply couldn't understand how he could defeat someone who was so strong and could heal himself. A moment later, the guy's hand was partially absorbed into the wall and he didn't understand how it happened. Panda approached the guy and said that if he couldn't win, there was only one option left, and that was defeat. The masked man wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away while Purple was immobilized and rushed into attack. Purple fought with all his might, and in the next moment, there was a loud explosion. The guys didn't understand how, but the guy was already standing on the roof of the building. Perp looked down at them and said he had no plans to go to the other world. Perp looked closely at the guys and realized that they didn't look like they were about to die. The guy asked them to look closely at his playing card because that card was a real gift. In Kim's diary, there was a memory of a girl named Henjun who told everyone every morning how much she loved them. Henjun was a very kind child who never hid her feelings and shared them with everyone. She evoked feelings even in children who were not very emotional themselves. The man in the mask returned from his memories because Purple insisted that he look closely at his playing card. After the guy got everyone's attention, he threw the playing card and it stuck into the asphalt. Panda followed the card with her eyes and was surprised that nothing happened. But when she looked back at where Purple had been standing, he was gone. The girl was angry because the guy had easily managed to fool them all. The assistant chairman entered the room and saw Rojul there, not quite understanding what was going on. Bruno asked Rojul about it directly, and the guy replied that he was just having a good time. One of the chairman's assistants was more interested in what had happened to the guy's hand. Rojul replied without much emotion that his hand had been swallowed by the wall, and told them that the mercenary from the red light district they had talked about earlier was not a mercenary at all, but the guardian of one of the kidnapped girls. The chairman's assistant suggested that the girl's guardian was involved in injuring the guy's arm, but Purple still insisted that his arm had been swallowed by the wall. Perp didn't understand why they had decided to get involved with someone so dangerous. He considered the man in the mask to be nothing more than a monster with superhuman strength. Barry was surprised that Rajul had failed the task for the first time. The man realized that now they could say with certainty that their enemy was on the same level as the top dogs of the streets. The assistant chairman didn't try to find out anything else and went about his business, saying only that he had more urgent matters to attend to and that they would talk about everything later. Barry advised Rajul to get some rest for now. Rosa looked a little confused and didn't know how to react. At that moment, the girls offered to treat the guy to some cake. Purple took the cake and went to treat his new friends, but some events were already unfolding in the room. Ani was trying with all her might to stop the men who were taking the girl away. One of the guards pushed her away and threatened that if she didn't want to get hurt, she'd better stay out of their way. The girl rushed to Rojul and asked him to do something to prevent the men from taking Henjon with them. She was very upset and couldn't accept that she couldn't stop those men. The girl was sure that those people were clearly going to do something very bad to Henjon. Out of helplessness, she fell to her knees in front of the young man and simply continued to beg him to do something, to help. At that moment, the man in the red mask, who was on the other side of the city, started running as fast as he could. The man paid no attention to anyone, but the people who got in his way were slightly stunned. Panda didn't waste any time and pulled a man out of his car, saying that they would borrow his vehicle for a short while. The girl told the rest of the guys to get in because it was time to go. Rhea didn't understand why Kim had suddenly rushed off so quickly. Panda replied that Kim was furious because he sensed that one of his children was in danger. She explained that when they first met, it was the same thing, and that Panda found it surprising that he had been calm for so long. Kim began to worry very much about the girl Henjin, and while he was running, he remembered a fragment from the past when they finally managed to find a cure for the cold. Teacher Kim really hoped that with this medicine, Soen would get better soon. The principal said that even though the doctor was in the slums, he could be trusted because he was an expert in his field. They both hoped so, but Teacher Kim was distracted by someone who grabbed his pants. This caused the man to lose his balance and fall to the ground. The little girl was the one who caused Mr. Kim to fall. The child couldn't help but laugh at the situation. The girl, who did not look very well groomed, asked the men to give her a coin. She added that metal would also be fine and that she would not even refuse food. Unfortunately, Mr. Kim did not have any money on him and could not help the girl, which made him look upset. The principal repeated the same words to the girl and called Mr. Kim over. After leaving the girl, Mr. Kim asked the principal why they had just left, since the child had come out onto the street to ask for help. The principal was sure that the girl's parents had forced her to do it and that it was a popular method. The principal knew that even in the abandoned slums, there were many people who showed mercy to children, which is why this trick had been devised. Many parents forced their children to do the same. The man believed that the real problem lay elsewhere. The director had no doubt that if this child received anything, she would immediately become a target for the beasts around her. However, the man was still very concerned about the situation. The empty mask flew off and many angry words were directed at the girl. The man was furious that the child had not received anything all day. He couldn't understand why the girl couldn't do her job properly, and this made him very angry. This man was the girl's father, and his anger was only growing, not subsiding at all. The father threatened the girl that if she ever dared to let him down again, he would immediately sell her to the red light district. The girl didn't dare to argue with her father and was willing to do anything just to be loved. The girl's father never liked it when she showed her feelings like that. The man decided that they had nothing more to talk about and that he was fed up with it all. He thought it would be better to just go to the other world together and decided to make it happen. The director, who appeared suddenly, prevented the man from carrying out his plan, and he couldn't believe or accept what was happening. He simply couldn't understand how such a wonderful child could have been born to such a monster. The director was convinced that parents should take care of their children so that they could grow up properly. He believed that it was simply unacceptable to mistreat a child out of some sense of superiority. The director decided to explain to the girl's father using his own methods so that he could more easily understand his mistake. It was well known that newborn babies always cried instinctively because they wanted to make themselves known. Children also smiled instinctively because they wanted to receive love from others. For these reasons, Henjon always smiled at everyone and was very happy because of it. Henjon smiled even when she was in pain. The girl did not stop crying even when she was suffering greatly or feeling lonely. Her father admitted that he had made a mistake and begged the man to stop. The principal did not understand why he should stop. The principal understood that if he hadn't come, this girl would have been in big trouble, would continue to mock her every day. The man was stopped by the girl, who grabbed his pants and thus attracted his attention. She asked him not to touch her father because she didn't want him to be hurt in any way. The director looked at the child and promised that he would never lay a finger on her father again, but only on one condition. The man ended up taking the girl with him and had no intention of leaving her in that house. The teacher wasn't sure if it was right to take the child away from her parents and felt bad about it. Looking at the sleeping child, the principal said that he would do everything possible to ensure that the girl would never regret her decision to go to school with them. The man understood that they were not related to the child, but he was sure that they could eventually become a family in spirit. At that time, the chairman was sitting on his throne receiving a guest, and did not expect him to arrive so soon. Dr. Nog arrived at the chairman's office and immediately asked how he was feeling. Chairman Og replied that nothing had changed and that he was still suffering greatly. Dr. Nog believed that the time had come to get rid of the suffering and that it was time for the man to become the hero of the city once again. Dr. Nog saw the girl Henzon, whom he had met before, sitting in the chair next to him. Nog noticed the girl's smile and realized that the child was doing well, which was a joy to see. The man looked at the girl again and was sure that the medicine would work very well. Bari asked the doctor to start making the medicine as soon as possible. Dr. Nog prepared the necessary ingredients and told the girl that she would feel a little discomfort from the injection. It took him very little time, and so a few minutes later, Dr. Nog informed his assistant that everything was ready. Dr. Nog added that that was all and that the girl was now the medicine that Chairman Og needed. He said that the chairman must take this medicine within half an hour after eating in the morning and evening. Dr. Nog explained that there were other ways to prepare this medicine, but they required more time. Chairman Og had already satisfied his hunger and now wanted to destroy his medicine. Dr. Nog warned him that he had to wait another 10 minutes for it to take effect. That is why Dr. Nog was going to use a stopwatch and set the timer for 10 minutes. A moment later, a voice came over the radio demanding to know the location of Chairman Og. Barry couldn't understand who the loud voice belonged to. Barry tried to contact security on the radio to find out what was going on. Security reported to the assistant that an unidentified citizen was causing a commotion in the lobby. The assistant couldn't understand how they could hear the stranger's voice from the top floor if he was still in the lobby. Hang-Jun immediately recognized Teacher Kim and heard him promise that he would find her. The girl shouted as loudly as she could to Mr. Kim that she was upstairs waiting for him. The teacher heard his student's voice and Barry confirmed it, saying that his child was with them. The man in the red mask said into the radio that they could start preparing to meet him because he would definitely get to them. Barry considered it very rude to just show up at a large corporation like that and thought that it was necessary to make an appointment first and then come. The man in the mask replied that he had heard this before, but it did not stop her. Chairman Og was furious that the stranger had dared to speak that way about Hiro. The man therefore ordered Barry to tell the man to come up to him. Hiro was like a younger brother to the chairman, always giving strength to those who were suffering from illness. That was why Chairman Og felt he had to take revenge for his younger brother himself. The chairman shouted that Barry should not even dare to doubt his strength, because he would not lose under any circumstances. The man in the red mask was told over the radio to pay attention to the elevator doors as they opened and to get in. However, the man was warned that they would do everything in their power to stop him as he went up, and if he went to the other world, it would be his own fault. If the masked man managed to get there unharmed, only then would the man be able to meet with Chairman Ogo and his child. Barry hoped that the man would be able to get there safely given his abilities, which had enabled him to destroy the Gourmet Association. The elevator suddenly stopped on one of the floors, and when the doors opened, a bunch of guards rushed at the man, wanting to take him out as fast as possible. However, the men were unsuccessful and the elevator doors closed again, continuing its upward journey. Another entry in Kim's diary was about how, on a rainy night, a little girl sat on her bed, trembling with fear. Hang-Jun immediately realized that the girl was afraid of thunderstorms, and the child confirmed this, adding that usually Teacher Kim read books to her, and that calmed her down. But this time, the teacher was not there. The little girl suggested that Hyung-Jun read to her instead, but the problem was that Hyung-Jun didn't know how to read yet. At that moment, the principal was passing by the girls' room and decided to take a look. What he saw made him very happy. In the room, the boy was reading a fairy tale to all the children, and most of them were already sleeping peacefully. At that moment, the elevator continued to move upward and had already reached the 52nd floor. Seeing all this, Barry did not understand why the elevator was still moving, as he was sure that the man would be stopped and destroyed on the lower floors. The man decided to remind everyone that they were still employees of a giant food company, one of the largest corporations in the city. The chairman's personal security stationed on the 59th floor promised Mr. Barry that they would stop the stranger at all costs. Barry warned the guys that they would have to attack the stranger simultaneously as soon as the elevator doors opened. The guys knew that if they couldn't stop the guy here, he would go up to the top floor. That's why they had no choice but to show the masked man the power of giant food. The elevator rose to the 59th floor, where only the best of the best giant food workers were located. They all thought they could deal with the man on this floor thanks to their incredible abilities and unwavering dedication. However, their opponent exceeded all their expectations. The lights in the elevator cabin were flashing red because moments earlier, the man in the mask had destroyed all the security guards. The man himself exuded an aura of readiness to do the same to others as he had done to those who had already crossed his path. To all of them, Kim was the embodiment of a real monster. The elite security team of the giant food company sensed this instinctively. They realized that even if they combined all their forces, they would still have no chance of defeating him. A short time later, the elevator doors closed as none of the giant food employees were able to stop the man. The radio reported that, unfortunately, they had been unable to do anything and had not been able to win. Someone so strong is harder to defeat when he instills fear in those who have managed to survive. The elevator passenger took advantage of this and managed to greatly anger the assistant chairman, Og. The chairman was now convinced that the masked man had indeed destroyed the Gourmet Association single-handedly. Og was sure that the young man was simply destined to face him one-on-one in battle. After the elevator stopped on the top floor, the chairman was ready to face his rival. The elevator doors didn't just open, they flew open with great force, which looked impressive. The man in the red mask was very determined and ready to do anything to save his children. While Kim reached the top floor trying to save Hyung-Jun, Panda's group was in another part of the building trying to find Ramo. Despite the fact that most of the guards had gone to the other part of the building, there were still a lot of them here. Rhea said that Patch had indicated that Ramo should be in this place, but she thought that the child Kim had gone to look for could also be here. Panda replied that in that case, they would save both of them. A man came out to the group and realized that it was these people that Mr. Barry had warned him about. The man said that he was very pleased to meet the uninvited guests. A guy named Tongs came out, stood in front of the kids, and continued brushing his teeth, thinking it was very important. Tongs believed that brushing your teeth was what distinguished humans from animals, and, in his opinion, it was something that should never be forgotten. The policeman immediately recognized Mr. Tongs and was very surprised, his emotions evident on his face. Rhea noticed the guy's reaction and decided to find out how powerful this man was. The policeman replied that if you consider that Mr. Barry was the right-hand man of Chairman Oga and was always by his side, then Tongs held a different position. Many people knew that Mr. Tongs was the left hand and therefore in charge of everything else. Mr. Tong was very curious as to why the police officer was here at this time, instead of guarding the main gate. The policeman was very surprised that Mr. Tongs remembered him, as they had only met once or twice at city events. Tongs did not know the guy's name, but he was good at remembering faces he had seen even once. Tongs believed that this skill was very useful in the restaurant business when dealing with guests. The gentleman remembered well that the guy had been with that not very pleasant police officer at the time. The policeman was surprised that Mr. Tongs called him Sanbei, an unpleasant officer. Without thinking twice, the guy immediately took Mr. Tong's side and told him that all these guys were criminals who had sent Chairman Harrow to the other world. Panda did not expect and was not prepared for police officer Tansi to commit such an act and betray his comrades. Tansu loudly declared that he had never considered them his comrades and did not understand what the girl was talking about. The policeman hoped that Mr. Tong would soon deal with all these villains. Tongs assessed the situation in those few minutes and realized that the streets threatened the safety of the giant food. He wasn't going to let that happen and decided to activate the ability of the so-called dinner in his mouth. To begin with, Tongs used his fang skewer skill and directed this ability at Panda. Panda managed to react in time, but she couldn't completely avoid the attack. Tongs made no secret of the fact that he was aiming for her head, but the girl dodged so quickly that he didn't like it very much. The gentleman did not stop there and used the incisor knife skill. Rhea was terrified that Mr. Tongs was using his teeth as a weapon. Panda asked the girl to be careful as the guy was using different attacks every time. The guy continued his attack and the girls felt as if they were at the dentist's office, but they needed to figure out what to do next. Tongs decided to use something stronger and decided to use his molar skill, and the girls froze at the sight. Panda couldn't let it end like this and used her density skill. Tongs appreciated the girl's skill, but the man had a big advantage. His teeth grew back as soon as they were broken. That's why Mr. Tongs was calm, because he knew that he would win this battle anyway. Panda thought this guy was just as unreasonable as Kim. At that moment, the man in the mask recognized the doctor, for it was he who had kidnapped his children. Kim looked away and saw a very large man and immediately realized that he was Chairman Og. The doctor realized that there were other guardians at that school, and that was why one of their trucks had not returned. Kim saw that they were holding his Henzon hostage, but remembered that the girl was going to be used as medicine, and that was why she should not be in any danger at the moment. Before proceeding with the destruction of his uninvited guest, the chairman decided to ask Dr. Nogel how much time was left and heard the answer: 2 minutes. Og decided that this would be more than enough time. Og was going to make a toast to the person who had sent his younger brother Hiro to the other world. Returning to Kim's diary, there was a memory of the girl being asked her name. This happened after the director took the child away from her parents because of their mistreatment of her. The girl looked a little confused and didn't understand what the men wanted from her. The principal immediately realized that the girl didn't even have a name and decided to call her Henjon. The child thought that Henjin was some kind of thing, but she couldn't find anything in the man's hands. Teacher Kim then tried to explain everything to the girl in simple terms. The man in the mask returned from his memories and looked closely at Chairman Og, for it was he who was responsible for the kidnapping of the children. He believed that Og did not deserve forgiveness under any circumstances and should soon join his beloved brother Hiro. The man in the red mask gathered all his strength and directed it at the one who deserved punishment the most. The shockwave was so powerful that outside on the street, you could see all the windows on the top floor of the building shatter. The doctor watched all this with a slight look of fascination and was surprised that the man in the mask needed only one attack to achieve his goal. The masked man stood confidently, and next to him lay the defeated chairman, Og. The chairman's assistant, Barry, looked surprisingly calm and continued to stand in the same place. Kim wanted to just walk past this man, but Barry stopped him, blocking his way with his arm. He could see that Barry was clearly not the same person who had been standing above Chairman Og, so he didn't understand what Barry wanted from him, or what he wanted. Barry decided to simply inform the man that their battle with Chairman Og was not over, but rather just beginning. A moment later, the masked man was stunned, as something incredible had replaced the chairman. Chairman Og used his ability and activated the skill Bloody Vampire Aristocrat. Og had not used this form since the Great Battle. He now felt as if he had awakened from a long sleep. The chairman assessed the powerful blow of the masked man, and it was this that led him to transform into this form. The masked man tried to attack the monster again, but he failed and found himself trapped. Og revealed that his body was made entirely of blood. The chairman was able to grab the man while adjusting the density and impact of his body, but the masked man couldn't even touch him with a finger. That was why Og had become a representative of the blue blood. His strength proved that he was at the top of this city. Barry, watching all this, was once again convinced that Chairman Og would win. However, the assistant did not forget that this guy had defeated Perp Rojul in a fight, and therefore believed that caution would not hurt. Barry decided to use his radio to find out which of his men was closest to the isolation ward at that moment. Rojul was closest, and Barry ordered him to tell the guy to immediately bring the remaining child to the chairman's office. Rojul was given his new assignment, and he decided to ask the girl if she knew where Henzon had been taken. Purple considered this child to be quite quick-witted. The child was sitting on the floor and replied that she had an idea where the girl had been taken. After receiving her answer, Roju decided that in that case, he no longer needed to pretend to be their friend. He didn't know why, but the girl also needed to be taken to that place. Finally, the girl decided to find out something. She said that at first, this unfamiliar place had frightened her greatly, and she did not like the suspiciously friendly attitude toward them. However, as time passed, the girl began to think that things weren't so bad and she even started to have fun. She really wanted her and Rojul to meet under better circumstances. Purple still couldn't understand what the girl was trying to say. The child was very curious to know if Rojul ever thought about his friends the way she did. Rojul looked very surprised and clearly did not expect anything like this from the girl, but he quickly pulled himself together and replied that of course not. The guy added that he was a city mercenary and was only watching over them because he was paid very well for it. Rojul believed that he had done an excellent job and felt absolutely nothing. At that moment, a bell rang, causing Rojul to freeze and initially unable to move. After that, the guy couldn't stand on his feet and collapsed on the floor, looking unwell. Rojul tried to pull himself together and understand what the girl had done to him. The guy heard the girl say that she was very sorry that she had ruined Henjan. She thought that maybe she could have saved Henjan. The girl believed that it would have been possible to escape from there if she had tried hard enough, but in reality it was not that simple. She was not alone, but with Henjan, and neither of them could escape from there. Therefore, in her opinion, she made the most rational and correct decision, which was to stay in that room and go to the other world instead of Henjan. However, it all turned out to be pointless because in the end, Henjan was taken instead of her. The girl looked at Rojula and admitted that she was indeed a very calculating and cunning child. There was an unspoken rule among people with superpowers. Every person with abilities was dangerous, so you had to be careful with everyone you met. Her ability was quite complicated. If someone lied to her, the bell of their soul would ring, and if that bell rang 100 times, the girl could completely control that person. Therefore, the ability of mourning remorse was activated. This ability worked perfectly on Roju, who had a habit of not trusting anyone and constantly deceiving others. The girl was very grateful to the guy for lying to her once again. The guard standing behind the door began to get nervous because Rojul was taking a long time, so the man decided to go in and check for himself. The man opened the door and asked Mr. Rojul to hurry up, but inside the room a surprise awaited him. The guard couldn't even understand what was happening when, a moment later, a playing card flew at him and sent him to the next world. Rodzu told the girl that they should hurry because it would be very awkward if Barry found out about all this. Kim's diary described a fragment of his past life about self-defense. The boy wanted to teach the little girl how to dodge, and if a bad person tried to attack her, she would need to dodge and turn her head toward her shoulder. He decided to demonstrate it and was sure that the girl would do everything right, but that didn't happen, and the boy couldn't understand why. Hengjeon then said that her father had forbidden her to dodge or block attacks. Another child rushed into the room and immediately attacked the boy because she was angry that he had asked her to play with Henjin, but he was doing something she didn't understand. The boy didn't even understand how it all happened and was now trying to recover from what he had experienced a minute earlier. The children were now split between two high-rise buildings with events unfolding in each of them. The chairman believed that the man in the mask was actually worthy of praise, and he couldn't believe that the man had not yet gone to his death in battle with him, the chairman of the Blue Bloods. The man replied that he simply could not die even if he wanted to. The chairman laughed at these words and said that the man was greatly mistaken. Og assured him that this was not the case and that the man was not omnipotent, for unfortunately he could not grant such omnipotence to people. The man in the mask did not understand who the chairman was talking about, so Og explained that he was talking about the one who gave everyone superpowers. The chairman assured him that the man in the mask's abilities had also been granted. A few minutes later, something strange began to happen to the man, or rather to his body. Chairman Og also noticed this and was delighted by what he saw, because it meant that everything had worked. Og had managed to add some of his blood to the man during the attack. This was possible because Og loved to eat, but his blood had the same effect as digestive juices. Han knew that it didn't matter how well the guy in the mask recovered, because he would eventually dissolve and disappear. Kim struggled a bit but was finally able to get rid of what the chairman had given him. The chairman now understood why the guy in the mask thought he was invincible. Kim looked at his opponent and noticed that he was liquid, and thought that it would not be a bad idea to have a freezer nearby so that he could put him in it. The masked guy immediately changed his mind because Og was a battle-hardened veteran, and there was no way to defeat him that way. Kim understood that, as sad as it sounded, he couldn't defeat the chairman right now. The doctor intervened in their conversation and warned Mr. Og that it was time to take his medicine. The chairman, in the heat of battle, had completely forgotten about it. Og thought that his battle with the young man would clearly be a long one, so he decided that he should fortify himself first. The chairman headed toward Henjin, intending to put his plan into action. However, he was unsuccessful as the masked guy was much quicker and faster and managed to grab the girl in time. The chairman's assistant was surprised by the speed of the masked man, as he didn't even have time to react. He didn't think that the masked man was hiding his strength. Most likely, his desire to save the child made him stronger. Chairman Og was furious because the medicine that belonged to him had been taken away. Kim looked at the girl and realized that revenge was not important at the moment. First, he had to get Henzon to safety as quickly as possible. The man tried to figure out how to do this. and after looking around the room, Kim saw a staircase that led to an emergency exit. Kim ran with the girl in his arms as fast as he could because his only goal was to save the child. The man broke down the door to the emergency staircase because every second was important. Once on the stairs, Kim realized that he could use them to get down to the first floor. Chairman Oh shouted after the man that he would never let them go and would do everything in his power to stop him. Kim turned to Hyungjun and told the girl that unfortunately he would have to stay and she would have to go down alone. The man told the girl that he believed she could do it because he thought she was very strong. After giving Hyungjun instructions, Kim immediately rushed to attack the chairman. The young man had a plan, and gathering all his strength, he struck the floor. Immediately after this attack, large cracks appeared, and the chairman fell halfway to the floor. The doctor who was watching everything saw that the problem was getting worse and decided that there was nothing more he could do and that it was time to leave. Finally, Dr. Norg wished the chairman and his assistant good luck. The employees of the giant food company who were on the floor below heard the sounds of a fierce battle. They were convinced that they would not be able to handle the man in the mask on their own, and had no idea how the guy had managed to hold out against Ogo for so long. A few minutes later, they saw the ceiling above them begin to collapse and ran in different directions. The chairman was furious that the masked man had first stolen his medicine and then decided to destroy his building. Kim understood that although he had not been able to harm the chairman, the collapse of Oga's building would disorient them for a while. The guy decided that if he continued in the same vein, he would be able to buy some more time for Hyungjun to escape. Kim had no intention of stopping. On the contrary, he convinced himself that he had to keep going, no matter how difficult it was. Thanks to the guy's persistence, Chairman Oh broke through another floor. Oh himself couldn't believe that he was being defeated by some street thug. The chairman thought that if he had been able to take his medicine and his body had not been damaged, he clearly would not have had to resort to this attack. That's why the chairman shouted to his assistant Barry to start the ritual immediately. Kim was surprised because he thought Barry wasn't participating in the battle and was just watching from the sidelines. Barry hurried to carry out the chairman's orders, activated his ability, and applied peace inside the pocket. Barry's ability, Peace Within the Pocket, allowed him to store items of a certain size or smaller. As for liquids that did not have a specific shape, Barry constantly stored large amounts of blood at the chairman's orders. This amount would be enough to create an entire waterfall. The fire that had consumed the enormous amount of blood, prepared for his complete recovery after taking the medicine, temporarily reached its peak. It was a real monster that would stop at nothing until it achieved its goal. At that moment, Henzon was descending the stairs, trying to do so as quickly as possible so as not to fall back into the hands of that monster. There were many floors, and halfway down the girl slowed down because she was tired. After a few flights of stairs, Hanjong stumbled and lost her balance, causing her to fall. Hangjun remembered the words of her teacher Kim, who had told her that she was strong and would definitely overcome everything. With these thoughts in mind, the girl gathered herself and continued on her way, despite the fact that she had badly injured her leg in the fall. When people talk about strength, they usually compare the person who possesses it to some kind of animal, namely stronger than a bear, or perhaps faster than a horse, or someone whose grip is stronger than a crocodile's bite. However, no matter how strong these people were, there was something they could not overcome. No matter how much they wanted to, they could not resist natural disasters. This was the very limit of human capabilities, and it was impossible to change. The chairman was already familiar with the superpowers of the masked man, but Og was sure that he would not be able to cope with the sea. Kim was trapped, and there was almost no way out. The chairman repeated over and over that the guy had no choice but to give up and disappear once and for all. I had no doubt that for the masked man, this was the end of their battle. The chairman began to get a little nervous because the side effects of using his abilities were much stronger than he had expected. Og understood that he simply had to take his medicine as soon as possible, so he hurried to catch up with Henzon. Upon entering the stairwell, Chairman Og immediately smelled the scent of the person he needed so badly. Hengjon sensed that she was being pursued and descended the stairs as quickly as she could. A few minutes later, Chairman Og finally found the girl and was very happy. Kim immediately sensed that Hengjon was in danger and knew he had to save the child, but his body had already almost dissolved. The man thought that he had probably been too cocky to think he could defeat Og. The image of the boy in the red mask appeared and told Kim that he must return. The boy reminded him that he had promised the director to protect these children and their future. He reminded Kim of the most important thing, which was that the man had promised the girl that he would definitely return. Kim did not understand who this person was. The boy replied that he was the creator of this series of masks and explained that the mask served as a barrier that suppressed some emotions and intensified others. The strength of the man's abilities was proportional to the feelings he experienced. The fact that Kim couldn't take off the mask just meant that the man wasn't being completely honest with himself. All this was also connected with the fact that Kim was furious and very worried because he didn't know what would happen to his child. The boy advised the man to let out all the emotions that were boiling inside him. The chairman didn't waste any time and was already almost at the girl. Og was sure that no one would dare to stop or interfere with him. A moment later, an attack was launched, and Chairman Og was injured because he did not expect anything like this. Kim shielded Henzon with his body and said that he would never allow anyone to touch his children again. The chairman couldn't control his emotions because he was very angry. Ogi didn't understand how a guy in a mask could be so much stronger than him. Superpowers were not the same as muscles. The more you use them, the better you get at controlling them, but they don't get stronger. Of course, they could be strengthened, for example, by drinking blood, but there had never been a case of someone becoming stronger due to psychological factors. Og was sure that no matter how the guy attacked him, it wouldn't hurt him. The chairman believed that the masked guy simply wouldn't be able to withstand a sea of blood, but Kim wanted to prove otherwise. The guy put all his anger and strength into his attack and hoped that it would not pass without a trace. The chairman noticed that the guy's hands weren't even touching him, but his body was still being pushed upward. I'll guess that it was most likely due to a wind current. The guy created such strong wind currents with his attacks that he was ultimately pushed upward. This led to a powerful explosion that could be seen even from the street. Kim was about to finish the job, but he was stopped by something that appeared in Og's body. Barry woke up on the floor and was surprised that he had somehow managed to fly from that building to the next one. The assistant couldn't believe that the masked guy had simply pushed the chairman out. This guy with his superhuman strength reminded Barry of another hero, or more precisely, Bandila from the Hand of the Titan. Barry thought that if this guy had as much strength as Bandila, then the chairman was in a bad position. Barry felt he had to help his chairman as soon as possible, but he was angry that he didn't know what he could do. The assistant was distracted by a suspicious noise and became more cautious, realizing that enemy forces were also present. Rajul peeked out from behind the door and asked Barry to calm down, as it was only him. Barry tried to understand what had happened and asked Rajul the same question, hoping to hear the truth. Rajul replied that nothing special had happened, that he had simply caught someone from the street who was disguised as one of their employees. Purple couldn't understand why Barry was there since he himself had told the guy to bring the girl. Barry replied that he was ashamed to admit it, but he had been thrown out of the building during the battle with the enemy. Rajul now understood who had caused the explosion and found it amazing that Barry had survived at all. The guy also asked about the chairman's well-being, to which the assistant replied that Mr. Og was now in great danger. Looking at the girl, Barry decided to use her as a hostage and thus gain a little time for the city to launch a counterattack. The assistant added that he would guarantee Rajul's safety and asked him to follow him. However, a very unpleasant surprise awaited Barry. Barry managed to catch the playing cards that were thrown at him. He didn't like surprises at all and therefore didn't understand what Rajul was up to. While Rajul was surprised that the chairman's assistant had managed to catch the playing cards, Barry wondered why the guy would betray him for no reason. Barry suggested that perhaps Rajul had been bribed by people from the streets, as that was the only logical explanation. However, Rajul refuted his theory and said that he simply had his own reasons. Barry found it funny to hear all this because he knew perfectly well that the guy was only interested in money. So Barry said he would pay the guy twice as much as the street thugs had offered him. Rajul decided not to waste any time and attacked the chairman's assistant with his playing cards. Barry thought that even though the guy was from the streets and demanded money for everything, he was confident in Rajul because of his good reputation. The chairman's assistant had never been so disappointed, and it drove him crazy. Rajul did not hide the fact that he was also not thrilled with how much Barry expected from him. Barry dodged the attacks with playing cards and simultaneously attacked with his weapon. The fight was not easy, and neither of the men was going to give in. Each of them was determined to go all the way. Barry appreciated the guy's skill and considered Rajul the best in this business, which made him a worthy opponent. The assistant became more active and his attacks became more powerful and faster. Rajul was already struggling to dodge. Barry believed that Rajul was undoubtedly good at what he did, but what had happened to the young man's arm now made him weaker, and in this situation, that only played into the assistant's hands. Meanwhile, Kim was not sitting idly by and continued his battle with the chairman. The masked man looked closely at Oga and noticed that blood was beginning to pool around him. Kim finally realized where Chairman Oga's weak spot was. The masked guy aimed his attack right there and really hoped that would be the end of it. The targeted attack hit its mark, and Oga screamed so loudly that he could be heard at the other end of the city. After that, an explosion of incredible force occurred at that spot, and shrapnel scattered everywhere. People below ran away in panic, each trying to find shelter wherever they could. Kim landed safely on his feet and decided to carefully examine his surroundings. The masked man noticed that the large lump had not broken apart, apparently because it was too strong for the weak spot. The lump came to life and, in the chairman's voice, asked Kim to stop, saying that he fully acknowledged his defeat. The masked guy wanted to know what this lump was that had separated from the chairman. This lump turned out to be a tumor, and it was the cause of all the discomfort and problems for Chairman Ogu. It was a side effect of excessive use of abilities during a battle in the past. Even after Og turned into blood, the tumor did not go away, but instead continued to grow until it reached such a size. The masked man realized that, judging by everything, it was clearly not very pleasant for the chairman when he hit it. Augie said that in moments of danger, the tumor defended itself by absorbing his blood. Og also confessed that when his health deteriorated, he did something very stupid. The chairman promised the guy that he would never lay a finger on his children again. He repeated that he fully admitted his defeat and therefore asked the young man to stop. Kim, however, believed that this would not happen, all because the chairman had crossed all acceptable boundaries. Just shouldn't have touched his kids in the first place, and then this situation wouldn't have happened. The chairman promised the guy he would give him anything he wanted, on the condition that he spare him. He offered the masked man money, honor, and safety. This applied not only to him but also to his children. Kim replied to Ogu that he wasn't interested in any of that and didn't need it. The guy was sure that he would get everything he wanted and give his children only the best. Kim decided to end what he considered a pointless conversation and see the matter through to the end. After the guy's attack, there was an explosion, and it was the same cluster. Kim had no intention of sparing the man who had done this to his children.